female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, now, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me today. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is an absolute pleasure to have your company today. Time is just gone 3 minutes past 10 o'clock in the morning. And don't forget, if you do miss anything of the show, and why would you want to risk doing that, you can go to my YouTube page. We have cunningly called it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, and you can easily find it. You can then hit subscribe so you never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, I'm going to be talking about those, absurd, insane, mad net zero policies of Ed Miliband's, and also, by the way, Keir Starmer's, and the last Tory governments as well, which have been blamed for a shock rise in energy bills that will see millions of us pay more this winter, an extra 35 quid on our bills. The regulator Ofgem said policy costs on wind farms imposed by the Net Zero Secretary have contributed to the price cap, rising at double the rate forecast by industry analysts, which is very weird because it's gone up and yet we were told it would go down by 300 quid, and that hasn't quite happened. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Do give us a call. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text that costs £1, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about a terrorist who was part of an Islamic State beheading gang dubbed the Beatles because of their 4 of them, clear British accents. Remember Jihadi John? Well, Jihadi Ringo wants to return to the UK. El Shafi El Sheikh, known as Jihadi Ringo, he's applied to transfer from a high-security US jail where he's serving 8 life sentences for his part in killing hostages, including a British aid worker. But he wants to return to his home country of Britain, despite the fact that they've taken away his British citizenship and he was born in Sudan. sod off to Sudan, mate. We don't want you. Plus, a report by the Refugee Council has recommended that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, ends the use of migrant hotels by March very easily with a one-off scheme providing temporary permission for asylum seekers from 5 key countries, Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea and others, to be given temporary permission to stay, with obviously lots of security safeguards, they say, and then they are able to rent homes and work themselves while their claims are being processed. This is properly insane, and therefore very likely to be taken up by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. We're talking about that. Plus, Sir Tony Blair has briefed Donald Trump on their plan to rebuild Gaza in a meeting at the White House on Wednesday. It's according to a senior official. Discussions come amid growing anger about a double Israeli strike on a hospital in southern Gaza, which killed 20 people, including journalists and emergency workers. What a shame. The same people are not so disturbed by the attack by the Russians on Kyiv, which killed 14 people overnight. But oh no, they're all quite relaxed about that, because you know what, doesn't involve Israel. But there we are. Lots coming up, lots to talk about. And joining me for the chat throughout is Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, who, while I've been speaking, has donned a beret. Talk to me about this green beret you're wearing.
I have to put a hat on to take my hat off to you. Because
that's totally true.
Because last week I got the chance to sit in for Ian Collins on that side of the desk, and oh my goodness, is it different? And the way you make it look natural and come
God
across and all the rest of it, I have to take my hat off to you.
Well, we take our hat off to you for being one of our favourite guests who knows their stuff, which is why we have you in. I can't tell you how disconcerting it was that while I was reading and talking to you about what's on the show, he's putting a hat on, and I could, out the corner of my eye. Although I understand that it's a regimental beret, it did have slightly, Betty. It did have a Betty term.
It does, yes.
It did. Right, thank goodness we got that even done. But you're very kind. Well done to you for stepping in for Ian Collins. I know. I mean, of course, Alex Phillips was supposed to be standing in on my show last week and was unwell, and Kevin. So we've had a little bit of a roundabout of jigging around, and of course we've got Jeremy Kyle in tomorrow for Mike Graham. That's going to be a lively handover, I can tell you that. And so Mike's taking a well-earned break. Look, so much to talk about. Let's talk about starting with this energy bill hike. We know, let's face it, we're just used to energy bills going up, aren't they? Labour pledged at the last election to slash energy bills by 300 quid a year.
Yep.
Bearing in mind, they're now around the £1,700 mark for an average household. Mm-hmm. You may use more, you may use less, but around the £1,700 mark. 5 years ago, they were around the £1,000 mark.
Yep.
And before we had the lockdown and with supply issues, and then we had Ukraine war, and not just the sanctions but the Ukraine war itself. They went up, from £1,200 onward from that. But we were told £300 lower. In fact, with this latest energy price cap rise, they're going to be £187 a year higher.
Yep.
Missed their mark by 487 quid. Was that just a lie, or can we understand it? But when the regulator, Ofgem, the politically neutral regulator, said that the basically policy costs imposed by the Energy Secretary have contributed to the price cap rising at 2%, double what was expected. Because this is the madness, people. We're having to pay more to switch off wind turbines at times when they're generating too much power, and then funding gas plants to step in when the wind is not blowing. This is literally the basis of a net zero policy. It's crazy, Philip.
We should have opened a wind farm business. We would have been making a fortune. Yeah, but I think what this does is it highlights the fact that in opposition, the Labour Party did zero planning. They just came out with mad policies that they thought were good sound bites.
We were already doing this under the Tories.
We were, but Labour turned around and said that they were going to cut the energy bill. Ed Miliband turned around and said he was going to cut energy bills by 300 quid.
Because if we stop relying on those awful despots that we get all our gas and oil from, despite the fact that actually, I think 94%, I think it is roughly, of our gas and oil is actually from, neighbouring, either from America or Norway or our allies.
Yeah, but Norway gets it out of the North Sea, and we've stopped taking stuff from the North Sea.
Wait a minute, let me clarify.
The pipe goes...
Is the North Sea anywhere near us? Let me double check on Google Maps. Oh, it's really, really near us.
Well, if we ask Nicola Sturgeon, it's not. It belongs to her.
It's near Scotland. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it genuinely is painful, isn't it? And part of the reason our bills are going up is also,
it's incompetence.
It's basically us. We're all anyone who's not on a low income is basically helping to pay the there's £150 off energy costs this winter for 6 million low-income families. Now, if you don't go around bleating about how, it's unfair that people on low incomes having high energy bills when, well, that's the deal. We all pay more so people can pay less. We're subsidising people on lower incomes. And we're already doing that with our income tax to pay for people on benefits, etc., and pay for pensions, but we're subsidising on a double whammy there as well. But the point of this is all just totally and utterly nonsense mathematics. And we're constantly being told that with renewables we'll have more security, more and cheaper prices, and yet we've got loads more renewable energy than many other countries, and yet certainly for manufacturing we have 4 times the energy costs as America has, and we are 50%, our prices across the board are 50% more than they are in Europe. We're told it's nothing to do with us, it's the wholesale gas prices. No, the wholesale gas prices have been flatlining, but we're still going up in prices we pay. The
energy policy in this country is impacting, as you said, the manufacturing industry. It's impacting private people and everything, and we're one of the most expensive energy countries in the world.
And we've even got Ed Miliband going up against the Science Technology Secretary, over the fact that absurdly, he wants us to really go into AI, but of course you can't move into AI. AI involves extraordinary amounts of energy.
Of energy for the server farms.
Yeah. So I mean, they're pushing 2 policies that are diametrically opposed.
But didn't you read the memo? AI solves everything. So whenever you get stuck, you just say, we're coming up with an AI policy that will solve that.
I mean, also, we're going to get all those AI jobs lost. Basically, we're going to lose those jobs to AI, but we're going to have all those green jobs to make up for it, so everything's going to be fine. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It still blows my tiny little mind that people are signed up to this. When people say, oh, are you a climate scientist? And you're like, no. But I went to school at the age of 6 and did enough maths by then that I can work out that the numbers don't add up. That I can tell you that right now. I want to know about these mad net zero policies. They've been blamed for a shock rise in energy bills that will see millions pay more this winter. The Ofgem have said that is one of the reasons why. What is your reaction? And it's not even just like, oh, well, it's cleaner energy, so it's costing a bit more. But no, to turn the wind farms off, and then to use gas.
But it's not clean. It's not cleaner.
I mean, first of all, you ship the wind turbines over
wind turbines and the hundreds of tons of concrete that have to be poured underneath.
Also, by the way, they last about 10 years. We've had a load put up in the last 10 years. What do we do with them afterwards?
You can't dispose of them. They can't be recycled.
We're just going to have big piles of our landscape is just going to be lots and lots of big piles of old wind turbines lying on their side. Oh, we can't bury them because, there'll be some reason for that. Anyway, I need planning, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But let's also talk about where we are in terms of the mad people who can come to this country. What do you make of this Jihadi Ringo? Now, remember the Beatles, the ISIS Beatles?
I know it well.
Jihadi John was the one we most heard about because he was actually on camera beheading people, including the British aid worker David Haynes. And Jihadi John went to my local comp. So lovely place. Nice big railings. But anyway, that's where Jihadi John went to school in North London. But Jihadi Ringo, currently serving life in a high-security US jail after being convicted of hostage-taking and conspiracy to murder. 8 life sentences. They do a proper sentence in America. El Shafi El Sheikh, he has now applied to return to what he calls his home country, Britain. Wasn't born here, he's Sudanese. He was given British citizenship, having grown up here, but then decided to renounce that to join ISIS. Well, by then, you're not British, mate, so not my problem. He wants to come back here. He says he wants to be friends with a family for visiting at the prison, and he's applied to be switched from his Colorado prison to a UK jail. Under the International Prisoner Transfer Programme. Now, given that Trump's people and the White House have said repeatedly, look, you should take back your prisoners, we've convicted them. Let's face it, this guy, if it was in Britain, he would be looked at by Prevent and then he would decide he wasn't really a risk and then move on their way. What do you make of this? Should we have him back?
No, not at all. The High Court has made or the Supreme Court has made a perfectly good precedence looking at the Shamima Begum case because her British citizenship citizenship was taken away from her. She appealed that, and therefore they've concluded that the Home Office was right in not giving her any right to come back to this country. He's exactly the same.
Well, it's different, isn't it? Because Shamima Begum was born in Britain and doesn't have access to any other nationality.
Well, theoretically,
her grandparents or her parents are Bangladeshi, but she's not. She isn't Bangladeshi. I think it's Bangladesh or Pakistan.
Bangladeshi. If she, the rules for Bangladeshi citizenship was if she'd applied for Bangladeshi citizenship because her parents had been there by the age of 21, she could have had it. So whenever the legal ruling was made, she was eligible for Bangladeshi citizenship. He is in not even as strong a case as she is, and he didn't think about the families and the friends of those that he brutally murdered on video. So. No, let him rot in American jail.
Yeah, well, that's my thing. It was always a shame that she said Shamima Begum. At the time, I thought, I'm not sure we should take away British citizenship. I just wanted her to come back to Britain, but be put away for life.
We wouldn't be able to.
But that's it. But we don't do that. And if we're not going to do that, well, in that case, I don't want you back. But there we are. I also don't want people being able to stay here who've come here illegally and be able to work and again, pay for their own rent according to the Refugee Council. They won't be paying for their own rent. We'll be paying for it for them. But the Refugee Council, as I've just mentioned, are suggesting that to deal with this problem of having all these people in these hotels, and obviously lots of protests about them, and it's all very visible because people are aware of them now. The Home Office try to keep their location quiet. I mean, there's one within a 10-minute walk of my home. Didn't know anything about it, not in the local paper. Council didn't ask anybody. If I want to change my sodding windows, I have to ask for permission from the council. Local hotel doesn't have to ask for permission to change. Well, the High Court says perhaps they do.
They did. So
we'll be looking into that local hotel. We're no longer a public hotel. We're now a private hotel. No, you're not. You're a hostel. You're a building of multiple occupancy. And I'm not allowed to suddenly set up a business in my home or anything like that. So anyway. We have got a Court of Appeal case, Home Office and the hotel chain at the heart of that Bell Hotel in Epping ruling. They're trying to overturn that ruling, banning them from housing people from illegal migrants. But the Refugee Council is suggesting to Yvette Cooper, and my God, she's probably likely to listen to this, they want to close the hotels.
Yep.
But you can't get people out of the hotels because there's so many of them. And they're suggesting that actually you should have a permission to stay scheme, and then, really simple, then you could really easily just move these people out. And they're saying, look, a one-off scheme subject to rigorous security checks, ha ha ha. And basically, migrants who make up 4 out of 10 migrants in the hotels, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Iran, Sudan and Syria, also coincidentally those with the highest criminality rate, according to the official statistics, not what I'm saying, that they should be allowed on a temporary basis to work legally, and then they can pay rent, they can earn money in the legal market, and stop being a burden on the taxpayer. Another pull for the people smugglers to say, hey, come over here, and also claim you're from Afghanistan, Eritrea, blah, blah, blah. But B, these people are not going to be able to get high-paid jobs and afford their rent. No. We'll still be paying for their accommodation, subsidising their income. They're probably still going to work on the black market as well. I mean, this is properly insane, letting these people even give advice on this issue. Yeah,
completely insane. It's a slippery slope. It moves them, yes, out of the hotels, but into the local communities, so local authorities, and they'll then be entitled to all of the benefits. And when they suddenly start seeing the benefits, they're not going to do declared work or anything else. We need, again, this is another example like Ed Milliwatt's crazy, we're going to save you 300 quid because there was no planning. There was no planning whenever they decided to scrap the Rwanda scheme. Instead of going, we can see what the faults are on it, let's make it better.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think they were going to smash the gangs.
They were going to smash the gangs. How's that gone?
Do you know what I find extraordinary? The criticism from Labour of the Nigel Farage deportation scheme announced formally this week on Tuesday was that there's not enough detail. We haven't got the detail on it. It's like it's 3.5 years out from any general election. We could possibly put this to practice. There was quite a lot of detail actually, but we don't even know the detail of the one-in, one-out scheme, and it's already started. People have been detained.
But that's a success. It's a deterrent. You're going to be immediately interned and then sent back from where you came from, and we're going to take another 50 in. But if you can immediately intern everyone that's coming in for the one in, one out, why are you not doing it for everyone?
Exactly. Which is what the plan is. Exactly. What do you make of Nigel Farage being accused of rowing back? This news came out press conference yesterday that he held, talking about his deportation plans. He'd been asked on Tuesday, will you also deport women and children? He said, yes, everyone's going to be detained, everyone's going to be deported. Yesterday, he he was basically saying, look, women and children aren't going to be our priority, certainly for the first 5 years. If for a 5-year term, it's adult males that people are concerned about. Now, is that rowing back? Or
I see it as clarifying, and when you're put in the spot and you're asked to respond to a question.
Well, you should have foreseen that question.
You should have foreseen that question, and in principle you're getting everyone out, but actually in reality, women and children, which are the vast minority of those that are coming into this country illegally.
And even when they talk about children, they're talking about 16 and 17.
Exactly, but women and children probably have a better claim for asylum because they are fleeing some form of oppression or something else. But fighting age men don't.
Once you say, that women and children won't be deported, you literally just set up a new market for the smuggling gangs, don't you?
You do, but if you're going to say women and children will not be a priority, and you didn't say wouldn't be deported, you said would not be a priority.
Yeah. That would be where the British people would be, I think.
You then bring a rule in and say, but you can't bring your male relatives. So if you want to use that as an excuse to get your husband in, sorry, doesn't work, because either the whole family is oppressed or it's not. You just can't play the game.
And then people go, well, you can't be separating people from their children.
Yes, you can.
By the way, every Filipino nurse working in Britain has left her child behind, being looked after by grandparents. That's quite a normal thing. But we send people to prison. Yes. And we separate them from them. Yeah. We do this all. Those people weren't bothered about Lucy Connolly, who'd never done a violent act in her life, being kept away from her 12-year-old for a year. I mean, people, they're very bizarre on this, aren't they? Look, just one other thing I wanted to, again, love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Particularly, I mean, on this row over banning the housing of illegal migrants in hotels. This permission to stay scheme. Can anyone spot the hidden flaws in that? And all your thoughts on that. But just one final topic I want to ask you about in this section, and this is this horrific shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis, a primary school. 2 young children died, 17 injured. And it's absolutely fascinating reading the different reports in the different media about the gun attacker, the shooter. I've seen whole reports where they managed to avoid at any point using a pronoun.
Yes.
Why? Because the gun attacker was what they would, otherwise, if he was the victim, he would be a trans woman, but he is a trans-identified man. But because he's the perpetrator, barely mentioned, later identified as a man who claims to... No, can't say a trans woman. The headline, if it was a trans woman attacked by a gunman, that would be it. No, it was a trans-identified man. He was born Robert, he called himself Robin, I say neutral, and perhaps some people say a non-binary name. But this is not the first time we've seen incredibly violent acts by supposedly trans-identified people. The media are very, very, very quick to always, if it's a court case, they'll refer to a trans-identified man accused of sexual assault. They refer to him as she and her throughout and use his preferred name, even if it's not changed but legally by deed poll. And yet in this, a horrible, horrible act perpetrated against children at the school where his mother had worked. We'll just kind of sweep that trans bit under the carpet. So obvious and blatant, isn't it?
Right, it is completely obvious and blatant. And he hasn't committed this act because he is trans. He's committed this act because he is mentally ill. And
a lot of people would argue that trans, believing you are born in the wrong body, is a mental illness. It was treated as such, body dysmorphia, until about 10 years ago.
Yeah, and this is where the PC nature of the world is letting society down.
No, the abject failure of the media internationally, but particularly the British media, to honestly report things. You're allowed to report certain key facts. If he was still alive and there was a court case in Britain, say, you're still allowed to report basic things. They're arguing about, whether you should know someone's nationality or ethnicity. No, whether someone is a man or a woman, the number of crimes that have been assigned to women when they're actually men who claim, they're not even trans, they're claiming to be trans-identified.
This is where the media has failed to hold power to account whenever the
Yep.
politicians have tried to bring the PC policies in.
Yep.
All of the different groups that are out there have tried to exploit things, really just to line their own pockets.
Yep.
And this is where the media, instead of falling into line with it and trying to be equally PC or more PC than anyone else, should have been holding them to account.
Oh, I can't tell you how many
reality.
private text messages and messages I send to reporters saying, no, I'm going to factually corrected the Spectator newsletter this morning.
Yep.
You've managed not to use a single pronoun and you've said trans woman. No, trans-identified man. Call him what he is. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the stories we're talking about. We're going to get your calls, get your messages, in particular about mad net zero policies, putting up your energy bills, but also this bid to close down these asylum hotels. We've got this court case today, the Home Office and the hotel chain basically saying, we don't want hotels banned from housing illegal migrants, even though, of course, official government policy is to stop housing people in hotels. But there are some big question marks about, if you end that policy, where do the people go? We'll talk about that up next. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
I think they genuinely believe that all that was needed for the British economy was to kick out the Tories and to put the Labour hierarchy at the top table, and things would suddenly come good. Turns out that's not how things work economically. You actually need to have an economic strategy. There isn't one here. There are just wishes from the Labour
Exactly right. And it turns out as well, the stories in The Sun this morning, unemployment is going to reach highest levels since the COVID pandemic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show with me and Philip Ingram, stand-in presenter, of course. At any moment, I might decide to leave and just drop him in the hot seat again, and I'm sure it'll be as brilliant as you were last week, standing in for Ian Collins. Let's get to some of your messages coming in thick and fast about Ed Miliband's mad net zero policies, blamed by, not me, no, by Ofgem, the regulator, for a shock rise in energy bills that will see millions paid with £35 more this winter. And again, that is on top of, by the way, the extra sort of, 720 quid extra we are paying on what our bills were just 5 years ago. Because, we've all got to spare 720 quid in the bank, haven't we?
Of course,
I mean, who hasn't just got... I mean, most people in this country don't even have that in savings. Like something like sort of 40% of people don't even have that in savings. I mean, these are huge sums. Jane says, scrap it. No one voted for it. It's bankrupting us and will make no difference to the environment. Technically, Jane, it's been in the manifesto for the last few winning governments, this net zero stuff, but we weren't given a proper choice. I've always said it doesn't actually survive contact with reality or indeed the ballot box, where you've got a party clearly, as Reform UK have made very clear, they are saying we are scrapping net zero or dumping it, completely, not just playing along with it or moving the goalposts. That is only when you get a chance to actually have a proper vote on it. Dylan says, I don't know why this is so surprising. The day Millipede does something sensible, we'll all fall over his shot. This is a maniac, borderline Marxist government elected by accident. I think that's a fair description.
That is fair.
Dylan says, the worst possible politicians in the worst possible time. We simply have to get them out. Michael says, Miliband's a muppet. No disrespect to other muppets.
I think the Muppet should sue him for saying that.
I'm sorry, like that. I've got a picture of Big Bird in my head now. No, that's Sesame Street, isn't it?
That's Sesame Street.
I don't know, either way. I don't know why that really tickled me. Mark says, the man is completely useless with the money he has for net zero initiatives. I could lower bills, lower emissions and cut strain on the national grid. Simon says, it's absolutely sickening. I didn't get the education that man did, but at the same time I care for the nation I love, not my friends' pockets. I got the same education. I got exactly the same education Miliband did. We both went to Comps, we both got into Oxford, we both studied for PPE, philosophy, politics, economics, and I can tell you his numbers do not add up. Right, let's go to the phone lines now. And Ashley is on the line. He's called in from London to talk about the migrant hotels and where we are about this court case to try and basically overturn the ruling banning the Epping hotel, the Bella Hotel, from housing illegal migrants. Ashley, what do you want to say?
Morning. I'm actually in Epping at the moment, actually. So what I wanted to say is two things, right? My daughter obviously lives in Epping, right? Everyone's concerned there about what's happening, and I think people have kind of considered that the government's probably going to get one over and it's through. But more to the point is it's taken away from the fact of dealing with these people in the first place. All these legal cases, it actually is a bit of a relief for the government because what we've got at the moment, we've got about 6-to-1 people looking for rental property. So they want to remove these people from this hotel. I'm not saying they should stay in the hotel. What should happen? They shouldn't be there in the first place. But, but 6 people look at one property in this area, right?
Yeah.
So if they put them into the community, it means all of our prices for all of our kids that look to rent for a property or people to rent is going to go up, and there's going to be a lack of property. So it makes the situation housing-wise far worse, right? We then have a situation now where I understand that the government are looking at implementing a national insurance tax on us landlords who have a couple of properties or a property.
Yeah. How dare you invest your property wisely, Ashley? How dare you?
Well, we can't offset the mortgage, let alone anything else. So if you're making 2 or 3, 4% return as a little bit of money to one side, which it is sometimes pin money for people, this is going to kill it, which means lack of property is going to go up even more because people are going to say they've had enough.
And they'll sell it, and then someone will buy it, and then there's fewer rental properties, and guess what? The rents go up. But this is the thing. None of this is thought through. They literally don't do... I will say, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. The left hand doesn't even know what the left hand is doing. But this is the thing. One of my worries about getting people out of that, asylum seekers, out, illegal migrants, let's call them what they are, out of hotels, is that's because that's focused, and it's on the telly, and it's in the newspapers and on social media, and we're talking about it. Once they're all just sort of spread out, a couple of people here, 5 people here in different houses, we won't know where they are. Parents can't warn their children, don't walk past that house, by the way. And then we, and then the government thinks the problem is solved. What they want is the problem to disappear.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that they want to push it into the community so they can forget about it.
Yep.
Right. And then when something happens, it'll be we need to learn by our mistakes, and that's no good for the person that's affected. Right.
Exactly.
The reality is for me. But the reality for me is at the outset there should be in effect a tick box about whether you qualify to be assessed as a asylum seeker.
Yep.
If you don't have any ID as you arrive, if you throw it into the water, you're automatically evicted from the country. You don't comply that way. If genuine people come over, then they've got their information.
Again, they're the only issues.
We're too weak.
But where are you going to send people if they don't have any ID?
Well,
That's the only thing. That's where you say, that's when you do what Nigel Farage is saying. Fine, well, we'll take you to the Ascension Islands or Rwanda, and then you can sort it out among yourselves.
I don't think that. I think that the level of accommodation that they receive could be a par to that in France. Right, so we don't give them hotels. They're not going to have this lavish life. What they do is they go to an RF base. There are tents there, and that's what they say until the matter gets sorted out. They're not allowed out that perimeter. And they're not allowed, and they're also not allowed access to these ridiculous human rights lawyers if they don't comply with the requirements.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's literally what Reformers announced this week, which is why I'm cheering them on. Ashley, great call. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. 10:34 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to a Reform UK councillor, Westminster City Council, Layla Cunningham, about all of these stories and plenty more besides. This is Talk. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 10:37. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me, joined right now by Layla Cunningham. She's a Reform UK councillor and also co-leads Reform's campaign on law and order. Quite a big job that, Layla. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Julia.
Very much appreciate you joining us. Now, let's talk first of all, can we, about these energy bill hikes. The extra 35 quid. Look, it's not, an extra 500 or 1,000 quid as it was a few years back, and we all went, how are we going to pay our bills? But an extra 35 quid is more than a lot of people can afford on top of the 700 plus quid we've already had put on in the last few years. And even Ofgem has said the reason why, in part, is because we are paying for net zero policies that require us to have backup of gas power stations when the wind doesn't blow enough to be turned on at the last minute to provide gas, and to pay wind farms when we don't need the power from them to not produce any wind power at all. I mean, this is insane, isn't it?
I mean, it's absolutely insane. The net zero madness continues. I remember looking at my energy bill and speaking to a friend in France, and her energy bill was so much lower. And I was saying, why is it? And, we mustn't forget, Julia, that it was under the Conservatives that they shut down all our energy storage, thinking that we could always import cheap energy from Russia or from wherever. And the Ukraine war taught us otherwise. And then, they killed off our manufacturing base while British steel plants, car factories, energy-intensive industries are being effectively shut down. They choose to do this. What is the benefit of the net zero policy? And economics and policy is all about allocating rare resources to the right place, right? And money is the rarest of resources, and they're not allocating it to where it can maximise prosperity of Britain. Labour's green agenda effectively puts wind farms before working families.
But this is the thing. I mean, net zero is a policy that was in the manifesto. People sent a message to someone saying, oh, people didn't vote for this. Well, actually, people did. The Labour government was elected on net zero policies. They said they pushed it through. So was the last Tory government. So was the one before that, extraordinarily. I mean, because of these policies, it's been around for a while. Reform, as far as I'm aware, is the only party right now that is saying they would completely scrap the whole thing. Do you think that is going to be a big winning, vote-winning policy for your party at the next election?
I think it definitely will, because what we're facing now is more tax increases. They're even threatening to tax our homes. They're threatening to tax anything they can get their hands on. And maybe people voted for net zero, but they definitely didn't vote to give up more of their money to the government. And it's effectively a tax on us, right? It's a backward tax. While families choose between eating and heating, Labour's plan is to just drive bills through the roof and to chase some net zero while China opens a new coal plant every week.
Yeah. And by the way, the wind turbines, and the solar panels are made in the factories in China that are powered by coal. This is the bit that really breaks my soul.
And don't forget, with renewable energy, we cannot store it,
yep.
right? And we all know that it's very intermittent. So we will be relying. And as long as we don't reduce consumption, which we're not, we cannot reduce manufacturing of our energy because we'll have to rely on foreign countries.
Yeah.
We will scrap the green levies and we'll start real energy production in this country because we believe in abundance. We believe in our country's abundance and relying on our own selves.
Well, indeed, again, frack baby frack, drill baby drill, we've been hearing a lot about. Let's talk about your area where, you're involved in the campaign on law and order. We've got actually a court case. Obviously, we can't talk about the details of the court case ongoing at the moment, involving an allegation against someone who is an asylum seeker living in a hotel in Epping who was alleged to have sexually assaulted a child, and obviously pleading not guilty, and that trial is ongoing, so we can't talk about that. But that prompted a lot of protests. We've seen protests around the country over asylum hotels. Today we've got the Home Office and also the hotel chain that owns the Bell Hotel in Epping. They're at the Court of Appeal today, trying to overturn a ruling by the courts that the Bell Hotel was not allowed to house illegal migrants because basically there wasn't on a cunning little wheeze on planning permission. They hadn't changed the use of the property. We understand both Reform councillors and Tory councillors are now looking at this in all of their different areas, whether they can challenge asylum hotels. Are you doing that in Westminster? Have you got any asylum hotels in Westminster?
We did have some. We're not doing it. I don't have it in my ward, but I did have a hotel actually in my ward that was being used as a hostel. It wasn't for asylum seekers, and that is a big breach of planning laws and licensing laws. If you have a license to operate as a hotel or planning permission, then you have to seek another planning permission to use it as a hostel, which is what they're doing, and a lot of hotels have not. And that permission comes down to councils. So councils have quite a bit of power to grant this or not. And we'll be interested to see if Labour councils do allow. If I was hotels right now, not that I'm advising them, I'd be trying to apply for that change of use.
Yeah, well, that's it. My local area, I live in a Labour council in Camden. My local area, within 10 minutes walk, there is an asylum hotel that I've found out about. Been there 2 years. I've checked the planning. They've never done a planning application to change the use. They've told me, we're a private hotel. Well, you're either a hotel or you're not a hotel, right? You can't be a private hotel that's not open to a single person from the public, and they've got security doors, security not letting anyone in. So it suggests to me that they are no longer what they say they were. The question is whether can local people also challenge would be an issue, because I'm not sure my local Labour council is going to challenge. But is it a good idea, and as one of our callers, Ashley, just pointed out as well, of getting people out of asylum hotels? Because where are they going to go? Now, if Reform were in charge, they would be in, internment camps effectively, or deported from the country, the Ascension Islands, Rwanda, or wherever. But under the current policy, they're not going to be, they're not going to be deported. They're going to be living in local communities. They're going to be in rental accommodation, often rents that is sky high above what local people can afford because it's on a government contract. They just want to get rid of them. Then they won't be so visible to a local community. We won't know where a lot of these largely undocumented young men are. Is that a good idea especially when they're then also competing with local people for privately rented accommodation?
I mean, it's quite possibly the worst idea, and it's a massive failure of safeguarding on behalf of our government. And the fact that they don't have anywhere else to put them shows that there's been no planning. Julia, this isn't a new issue. And now we're hearing that they might want to fast track their stay simply because they're from countries which historically have high asylum grant rates. And let's look at these countries. These include people from Afghanistan, Eritrea, Sudan, all countries that we know from court data are of males that have been disproportionately involved in sexual violence and safeguarding failure. And the government's answer is, no, not better vetting. Apparently they said they're going to do intense checks. What exactly are they going to check when they've thrown their passport and all their documents in the sea? And it's not faster removals, no. And it's definitely not protecting women and girls. It's actually, to exactly like you say, put them above British people on the waiting list and put them into housing paid for by the taxpayer. It is so galling.
Oh. We're told, but they can work if these people under this Refugee Council proposal, that they'll be able to work. I mean, presumably they're all going to be highly paid doctors and engineers, and then they'll be paying their own rent.
I mean, we've seen what reliance on cheap foreign labour does to our country. We have massive problems with legal and illegal migration, the Boris wave. And we know that a low-skilled migrant will cost the average taxpayer £400,000 over their lifetime. And again, they're going to move these men out of hotels into private homes faster with public money. There's no way that whatever job they get is not going to pay their way. They are going to be accessing taxpayer money, and so basically they're rewarding the crossings even more.
Well, again, if people are allowed to work, then there'd be even more of an incentive to come. It's almost like these people are not paying attention to the actual facts, but there we are. Let's talk about the facts changing in terms of reforms policy. I've certainly, the weekend when I saw the interview that Nigel Farage did with the Times laying out what he wanted, he was going to announce on Tuesday, when he actually announced it, cheering on, absolutely on the mark on pretty much every single aspect of reforms policy in terms of tackling the invasion of illegal migrants to this country and how to tackle it. But he's already been accused of backtracking, right? Yesterday saying, well, actually, when asked on Tuesday, he was asked, will you also be detaining and deporting women and children? He said yes, though there were some difficulties, he said, with unaccompanied children. Yesterday, he said, well, they wouldn't be a priority. We wouldn't be deporting women and children in our first 5 years. Is that a backtrack? Is that a U-turn? And was that policy not thought through?
No, it's not a U-turn, because about massive proportion, and I don't want to name a number that I'm not sure of, but I think I heard somewhere over 90% are men. And that's what people are worried about. People are not worried about the few children or the few women that come through. It's the men. And as Zia said in the press conference, our aim is to deport them as soon as possible. And once we do that, once you know that if you cross here illegally, you will be deported, they'll stop coming, because effectively, Julia, Labour and Conservatives have decriminalised entering our country illegally. You and I wouldn't dream of rocking up to Heathrow Airport without a passport and saying, you know what, I don't have my passport. Do you mind putting me up in a hotel for a few months, because actually I've lost my credit card. Can you sort me out, please?
Yeah, good luck with that.
We of doing that. And while you're at it, give me some pocket money. We wouldn't dream of doing that, but that's effectively what's happening. So, yeah, there might be a few children, and that definitely is not the priority right now, and I don't think it's the British people's priority.
OK, very interesting. Thank you. Layla Cunningham, Reform UK councillor in Westminster Council. Thank you for joining us. 10:47 is the time. Quick thoughts from Philip Ingram on that. Do you think that was a U-turn? Was it a backtrack? Or was it understandable?
I think it's understandable. I think it's clarification. Whenever you're put in the spot, you come out with something that you haven't worded quite right, and then you clarify it afterwards. And he hasn't said not deport. He says it's not a priority.
Not for the first 5 years. But that would, I was saying, that would echo the British people's views.
Exactly. And when the majority are fighting-age men, and there are more than there are in the British Armed Forces have come in since we've been gathering statistics.
Whenever you tell me that stat, it just terrifies the living daylights.
It terrifies the living daylights out of me. We're getting a battalion a day more coming in.
It's as simple as that, isn't it? 10:47 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to the former Israeli government spokesman, Elon Levy, about why Tony Blair is involved in plans for post-war Gaza. Assuming we ever get there, this is Talk.
allegation.
There is still no real announcement. There's no meat on the bone. And that's what people will want. And the real problem is that when you've got people like Jack Straw, who is saying that you've got to do something to the ECHR, he's not saying pull out, but he is going very similar to looking at derogations or suspending bits of it. When you've got David Blunkett, a former Labour Home Secretary, saying something similar.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's turn our attention to what is happening in Israel and in Gaza right now with Elon Levy. He's the former Israeli government spokesman. He's also host of the Israel State of a Nation podcast. A very good morning to you, Elon.
Hello, good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, we found out overnight that Tony Blair is now involved in advising the US president. Sorry, I've got Philip Ingram here with his head in his hands in the studio as a former senior military intelligence officer. Tony Blair is advising both Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump on the future of Gaza. He was, of course, he was the former, Middle East envoy for the Western powers. Do you think that will help or hinder any chance of coming to any end to this war and indeed the future of Gaza?
I wish Sir Tony Blair the best of luck, because it's going to be a momentous challenge to rebuild Gaza after this war and make sure that terrorist groups cannot rebuild it as a launchpad for future attacks against Israel. You know, the reconstruction of Gaza will mean the reconstruction of Hamas, unless Hamas is removed from power. You just can't rebuild Gaza if Hamas is still there, because then it will rebuild its network of military tunnels under everything to prepare for the next October 7th massacre. So the elephant in the room is, how do you get Hamas to relinquish power? How do you get Hamas to lay down its arms? Because until Hamas agrees to end the war that it started on October 7th, 2023, there's nothing to rebuild, or you'll just be rebuilding its launchpad for the next war against Israel.
And this is one of the really big debates going on at the moment. And I found it extraordinary that a lot of people are talking about what happens the day after. Well, we need to get to the day of the war ending first. Lots of pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. We understand even from within leadership of the IDF, within his own government, and certainly we've seen some mass marches on the streets of Israel in recent weeks saying, and particularly hostage families, and again, they're coming from a very specific perspective. This, we need to end the war. We need to get all the hostages back. His argument has been very clear, which is you only get the hostages back when you actually are posing that threat to Hamas. But also, we're just going to have another October the 7th from Hamas if we don't destroy them completely. Where do you sit on that side, on that debate?
You know, Julia, I spent the weekend watching Hostage on Netflix, and I thought it was extraordinary to have a British Prime Minister, no spoilers, but explaining that she wouldn't allow her country to be held to ransom and refusing to negotiate with terrorists. That is the admirable position in the Netflix show. But in Israel, we're in the position where we have to negotiate with terrorists.
Well, you've paid ransoms. You've paid ransoms to terrorists.
And exactly, and paying a ransom. And the debate in Israel is, can we accept an end of the war on the terms that Hamas is demanding? Now, the painful debate now is, do we take a partial deal that lets some of the hostages out and pauses the war? Or do we use our military advantage to push for an end of the war that forces Hamas to release all of the hostages and to step down from power? So the position Netanyahu is taking is, we shouldn't take a partial deal that pauses the war. We should use the threat of conquering Gaza City to force Hamas to lay down its arms, relinquish power, and free all of the hostages, because I think there's an understanding, and everyone in Israel understands that, we're all on the same side here, that if you reward terrorists for taking hostages, you're going to encourage more acts of hostage taking.
That's why they took hostages. That's deliberately why they did it, because they know that they can get a few hundred Palestinian prisoners out every single time, including, by the way, last time round, a few years back, Yahya Sinwar, who has been convicted in an Israeli jail and was freed and was able to come out. But here's the thing: I can understand if I were the family member or close friend of a hostage currently being held, one of the 20 we believe is still alive, or obviously people want to get the bodies back of those they believe to be dead, just to make sure as they're not being desecrated, but also to be sure that they aren't still alive in the tunnels, emaciated, tortured, as we've seen some horrific videos lately. I would have one view, but I also understand why Benjamin Netanyahu, a man for whom I hold no candle as on his politics, understands why he holds the other view, that actually you can't just think about those 20 hostages, you have to think about you know, the population of Israel and the threat posed to them in the future. Is the answer, though, flattening Gaza City? Because the reason why Gaza City has not been flattened and actually is still, a functioning city is because, the Hamas terrorists were forced to flee, and because, further south, and because the IDF forces went house to house, but didn't bomb on the same extent they have done other cities, because they believe that so many of the hostages are held there. That is such a difficult dilemma for any political leader.
By the way, we've seen massive protests in Israel calling on the government to end the war and bring back the hostages. And I think they're inspiring scenes and show how much Israelis care for each other and for their citizens who are trapped in the dungeons of Hamas.
More than Hamas cares for its own citizens, yeah.
Exactly. But I think from outside it looks like there's a bigger argument in Israel than there actually is. Everyone in Israel understands that we're going to have to defeat Hamas sooner or later. The question is whether it's sooner or later. Yeah. Do you take a deal now to get as many hostages as you can and then defeat Hamas later? Or do you say we have to defeat Hamas now because that is more urgent? And the reason we're talking about a military operation to take Gaza City is that that is Hamas's main stronghold. It's where Hamas has built tunnels underneath literally everything inside Gaza. Not to protect civilians, it's using the civilians above ground to protect its military infrastructure underground.
Yeah, and they choose not to let those...
how do we...
sorry, apologies. I was going to say they choose not to let those civilians into the tunnels where they would be safe. What do you make, though, of, we've got British...
Julia, this is the crazy thing. Gaza has the world's biggest network of underground bomb shelters. Those 500 kilometers of tunnels are the biggest network of bomb shelters in the world, but Gaza and not letting escape.
Well, indeed. What do you make, though? We've had, journalists, the National Union of Journalists, which is basically a sort of communist organisation, as far as I can tell, calling on Number 10 in Britain to, take action against Israel over the killing of journalists. Now, we've seen lots of, in the case, this regretted, but Benjamin Netanyahu says attack on the hospital in Gaza, where we saw 20 people, including 5 journalists, died. But a lot of the times when so-called journalists, we understand, are targeted and or killed, actually they're not what most of us regard as journalists. They're Hamas propagandists, are they not? They're people who often celebrated even what happened on October the 7th. How concerned should you be, though, how that narrative that is in so much of the Western media is undermining Israel's, support for Israel internationally? Oh, have we frozen? I think.
Look, let's clear something up.
Sorry.
Israel does not target journalists as such.
Elon, hold on one second. Elon, my darling, we lost the signal just for one moment. Could you start that response again? Thank you. Oh, I think we've lost him again.
Let's be clear.
Have another
Israel
go.
Israel does not target journalists as such. Israel attacks Hamas military targets. But in Gaza, we've seen many Hamas militants who are playing dress up as journalists. There are at least 30 cases of people wearing press vests who turned out to be members of Hamas's military wing. Yeah. There are also many people who are passed off as journalists, even though they work for Hamas regime TV. Yeah. They work for Al-Aqsa TV, which is prescribed in its own right by the United States as a terrorist group for broadcasts that encourage child suicide bombings. Now, I don't know how it works in the UK with the NUJ. To my mind, you cannot work for a prescribed terrorist organisation and be a journalist.
Exactly. Elon Levy, I'm glad we managed to get your signal back just then. I very much appreciate you joining us. I'm going to get Philip Ingram's thoughts on all of that in just a couple of moments. Elon Levy is the host of the Israel State of a Nation podcast. Lots more coming up on the asylum hotels, on your electricity bills, you name it. It's all coming up. This is Talk.
is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, now, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, whether you're on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget, if you have missed anything of the show, you can go to my YouTube page, which they brilliantly, this is genius. They've called it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show to make it easy to find on YouTube. Subscribe and then you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this, I'm going to talk more about Ed Miliband's mad net zero policies. The regulator, Ofgem, has basically said one of the main reasons why it's going up by 35 quid for the average household, your electricity bill, on top of the 700 odd quid it's gone up since about 2020, is because of the policy on wind farms, where we have to pay wind farms not to produce more electricity because we don't need it, but we pay them anyway. I kid you not, we're paying for that. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant policy. Also going to be talking more about that report by the Refugee Council that's recommended to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, that she could end the use of migrant hotels by March with a one-off scheme providing temporary permission for asylum seekers from 5 key countries which have the highest rate of approval for asylum: Afghans, Syrians, Eritreans and others. She could allow them leave to work, leave to remain temporarily, and they can then pay for their own rent and get legal work while their asylum claims are processed. Of course, in no way at all will that in any way incentivise people to cross the channel, claim to be any of those nationalities and pay people smugglers to come here. Properly insane policy. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer is also facing a growing backlash from his own party, senior Labour figures, who calling on him to get the European Convention on Human Rights, either renege from it, sort of suspend use of it, or reform it so that more migrants can be deported. And according to the police inspectorate yesterday, more than 280,000 crimes went unrecorded last year, with the logging of antisocial behaviour unacceptably low. They don't bother actually investigating any crimes. There's any point reporting them. I think actually the reporting of crimes is on an astronomical level and way higher than that, but we'll talk about that coming up. Joining me for all the chat and all the big topics of the day, I'm delighted to say, still is Philip Ingram, MBE, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer. Good morning once again to you.
Again.
Now, I know you were itching to get involved in that conversation I had with the former Israeli government spokesman Elon Levy about Donald Trump getting advice from Tony Blair now. I mean, look, whatever your views on Tony Blair, I'd take Tony Blair giving advice over Steve Witkoff, his Middle East peace envoy, who's just a property magnate. By the way, Tony Blair has also advised him. He's got a property empire, pretty impressive, as do his kids as well. In terms of Tony Blair giving advice on that issue, and in terms of whether or not Netanyahu should go against, we understand what even his own military are saying to him in terms of furthering the war in Gaza and deals to get hostages back. Look, this is consuming an awful lot of international political energy, not just Donald Trump's, but this government's as well. Where do you stand on all of this?
Well, advice is, from Steve Witkoff. Kermit the Frog could give better advice than Steve Witkoff. So that puts Tony Blair
being a bit rude to Kermit the Frog
into that sort of perspective. Tony Blair's in it for what he can get out of it for himself. And for his
I'm so shocked that you should say that.
Yes, I know it's
Tony
terrible.
Blair in it for himself, making more money.
Exactly.
How is the Kazakh government anyway?
That's what his motivating factor is. Yes, he was envoy to the Middle East. He didn't seem to achieve anything whenever he was working as special envoy.
Spent a long time there.
He spent an awful long time there.
He probably does understand it, but there is an element where somebody who's sort of not got a, they're not got a sort of I don't know.
Skin in the game.
That's the phrase. I'm thinking of that's wrong. Skin in the game. It's not got someone's skin in the game who look at it, but also someone, because of the Good Friday Peace Agreement, and mainly that came about by saying one thing to a lot of people in one room, another thing to other people in that room, and kind of getting it all and muddying the waters a little bit and getting people to the table. I would not think of him as being the last person I would ask to get involved on this. Actually,
no, we'll not talk in the Good Friday Agreement because that was a complete disaster, and he actually elongated the troubles for longer than he should have done.
You think so?
Oh, 100%. Mo Mowlam lied. And Mo Mowlam decriminalised terrorism. The precedences that were set in that are shockingly bad.
Let's not get derailed onto that. And
then Tony Blair, with his Middle East policies, what he did in getting us involved in the war in Iraq. I personally think that he should be in prison for what went on there. And his motivation since then as special envoy is not about doing the best for the Middle East. A lot of the Middle East works on how you do business. And it's all about his foundation and the business and
making money.
And making money and the extending
rather
the empire.
than sort of a peace institute.
So that gives him an understanding.
Okay,
but
let's talk about just very briefly where Israel is right now, because loads of criticism. We've got the National Union of Journalists, an organisation I've never joined because also I used to sit next to the woman who ran it, and I've never seen anyone do less work in my life, which really bothers me. I went public sector or private, it just really, really bothered me to see someone who write one article a week. I mean, I'm sorry, not impressed. But they're basically, they espouse every fashionable left-wing view. They don't actually do anything to, in my view, actually help journalists do their job and their pay and the like. But basically, they're among many organisations and many bodies, many governments who are criticising the Israeli government for this airstrike on the hospital, which has led to 20 people dying, including 5 journalists. Lots of criticism of lots of journalists dying, but the reality is a lot of these people are not what most of us would regard as journalists. They're propagandists. They're people who actually worked for Hamas. They were militants.
Yeah, well, one of them I've seen die at least 12 times in different videos. And of course, there are no hospitals there, so all of these.
It's weird, isn't it? There are never any hospitals. And then there's a hospital where.
Exactly. All of these groups have protested that Israel has destroyed every hospital. There's no hospital for the population. But then Israel hits a hospital, and you look at the building, and it's not that badly damaged for everything that's going on around it in a war zone.
Basically, everything we are seing that is coming out is propaganda.
And
there will be people who are dying. We know that. We know that, including children.
Yeah, of course there are. But everything that comes out is completely controlled by Hamas. And if you put independent journalists in there, their outputs would either be controlled by Hamas, or there would be an accident and they wouldn't exist anymore.
I certainly wouldn't want someone like Jeremy Bowen from the BBC going in. I mean, my God, you may as well appoint him a propagandist in chief for Hamas these days. He should be ashamed of himself. I'm absolutely horrified by that.
Israel has lost the information domain. That's the trouble.
It frustrates me how much they have.
And Hamas knows that they can't win through military means tactically on the ground so they can beat Israel by undermining this international support.
And get countries like ours to say, even if you don't release all the hostages, we will recognise
a country, Palestine, which has never existed before.
Absolute outrage. It really is, isn't it? Staying on in Middle Eastern stories, the absolute fury about the ISIS Beatles. You remember them? I mean, this is, gosh, we went back about 10 years or so.
I saw most of the videos.
They were, yeah, exactly. There were 4 Brits who were involved high up in ISIS and basically were involved in the beheadings. You saw those awful images. They're known as the ISIS Beatles. Jihadi John was perhaps the most famous. He got killed. Bye. Thanks for that. Went to a comp just down the road. But they were basically the ones who we saw on camera with Americans and Brits. I mean, one was a British aid worker who were beheaded on camera in orange jumpsuits after being, tortured and starved and beaten. And again, I think the Western media, the view was, we don't show those images. We don't show the images of them in their jumpsuits either. We're not doing ISIS's bidding for them. But one of them, Jihadi Ringo. I mean, you don't want to be Ringo, do you? If you're going to be, you don't want to be Jihadi Ringo. But he wants to return to this country. He's been convicted. This is El Shafi El Sheikh. He's been convicted in 2022 in the US. He's in a high-security US jail. They do these things properly. Hostage-taking, conspiring to murder, serving 8 life sentences. He, though, wants to come back to the UK. He says it's his home. But he was born in Sudan.
Yep.
He grew up in London, but his British citizenship was revoked in 2018. In fact, he'd already denounced his British citizenship by joining ISIS, Islamic State.
Yep.
So, same as Shamima Begum. Should we have him back? And if he did come back, and by the way, the US would like us to take the prisoners that they have got in the same way that we deport. I mean, we want to deport our foreign prisoners. I don't really see why the Americans should want to deport theirs. But the reality is, I mean, Prevent would take one look at this guy and go, oh, he's probably not a threat, and let him out.
Well, possibly. But, it's Seb Gorka that's turning around and saying on behalf of the
Friend
Americans
of the
that he wants UK to take him. Well, send him back to where he comes from. So send him back to Sudan. If America wants to deport him, send him there. Should we take him back? No.
Yeah, I mean, it's just 100%. It's a really straight, easy one, that one, isn't it?
Very simple.
But there we are. Should we do what the Refugee Council is suggesting to the Home Secretary? And, oh dear, I have an horrible feeling she might actually go along with this. This is properly insane policy. This is the idea that basically they say, you want to get asylum seekers out of hotels, which we do, and we've got a court case today where the Home Office is also bidding to appeal against a decision by a court basically banning the Bell Hotel in Epping from housing asylum seekers, and there's an interim injunction stopping that from happening, saying they'll have to be moved out. The Home Office is getting involved, as is the hotel chain itself. It's going to be a very significant case. But the Refugee Council has said to the Home Secretary, you could adopt a practical proposal. You could move more than 33,000 migrants from asylum accommodation within months. And they're saying a one-off scheme, if you give permission to stay for a limited period, subject to rigorous security checks, even harder laughter, to people whose country of origin makes them almost certain to be recognised as refugees. They will be migrants from Afghanistan, Eritrea, Iran, Sudan and Syria, who incidentally, quite coincidentally, also have, according to official stats, the highest criminality rate, particularly sexual assaults on women and girls. It would allow them to basically to work. They can pay for their own rented accommodation. They can fund it themselves, and then we wouldn't have to be paying for their own hotels. Philip, I don't know how long we've got for this, but how many things are wrong with this insane idea?
All of them. So that sums that up. A much better solution would be we get an old military base, an old airfield. You get the hangars that are in there, you put bunk beds in them, you put extra barbed wire on the outside, and you put them all in there until they're processed. And they have
or they choose to leave.
Or they choose to leave, and they have to prove somehow or other. And with DNA tests and stuff now, you look at Ancestry and other DNA online testing.
Don't think we're allowed to DNA test. That would be against their human rights.
Well, oh dear, what a pity. Well, never mind. You can identify what countries people come from. So if they say that they're Afghani and their DNA says no, you're Eritrean, you can then go, you're lying out.
Yeah. These countries won't take them back, and that's where
then we need a
Rwanda policy.
Third-party country. Rwanda would have worked.
Yeah, and the the Reform UK policy they've announced, basically, well, it's Rwanda, Albania. Rwanda say they're interested in doing a deal. But it's got to be en masse. It can't be a couple hundred people. It can't be a pilot scheme. As of today, you're gone. And until then, you will be kept in account. But the madness of this is, 4 in 10 migrants in hotels are from these 5 countries, they're suggesting, just over 33,000 people. Mostly they're in hotels, but also houses of multiple occupancy, bedsits and flats. If you say, right, okay, you can go and work, these people are not getting highly paid jobs where they're paying for their own accommodation or their needs. They're going to stay in the black market, of course they are, because the smuggling gangs can take a load of their wages. That's part of the deal. Often these people haven't paid the 1,500 quid to come over. The smuggling gangs take money. They're the ones who've got their passports. It's this organised criminality, people. These are not desperate people fleeing France, but they're able to work. These are not people who are going to be earning 40, 50 grand a year. No. There's going to be cash in hand jobs doing low skilled work in the black market. They're not going to be able to afford to pay their rent. So we're going to still do it with housing benefits. So we're still sodding well paying for them, and they will be competing on the rental market with other families from Britain. Plus, you've then got a massive big flag going up on the white cliffs of Dover saying, hey, come over, you can live in your own accommodation and you can say you're from these countries. And that's what's going to happen. It's the same as what happened in 2015 when all the Syrians came over. Angela Merkel said, we've seen a 2-year-old dead on the beach, so now we're going to open our country up to Syria. 1 million people arrived in Germany. There were many other millions who came across, I think it was like 3 million in total. 1 million people arrived in Germany. Only, I think, 40% of them turned out to actually be from Syria. I know this is shocking to people. Sometimes people who are willing to travel illegally to other countries lie.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Shocking. Absolutely shocking. It's going to open the floodgates for people coming in, and it's going to take what is already a horrendous bill in paying for the asylum seekers in hotels and all the rest of it, into putting them into place where they're then going to be, the change of status is almost certainly going to allow them to claim every other benefit that there is out there. And when they get the benefits in, they're going, I'm not going to work, because they'll work in the black market, as you say, for these organised crime gangs, paying them back. And live for free with everything else, or not for free because we're paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's never free for us. It is extraordinary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also want to hear your thoughts on this next story. And this is Ed Miliband's net zero lunacy, which is being blamed for our energy bill hikes. And it's not me just saying this, it is true. We'll be talking to an expert on this coming up very soon. But it's Ofgem, the regulator, basically saying the bills were supposed to go up, we thought, by about 1%, or the cap on the bills for the average household, to £1,755 a year. They always go up in October, by the way, ready for the cold winter months. They always go down a bit in the summer. Brilliant. I just did my gas reading. Barely used anything. Funnily enough, it's been 30 degrees. I've not had my heating on. Imagine the shocker for that, But basically, we're having to pay more because they are switching off wind turbines at times when they're generating too much power, and they don't have the network capability to send it from, north of Scotland down to Cornwall. But we're also funding the gas plants that have to step in at last moment at very high sort of marginal cost when the wind is not blowing enough. It's almost like there was a reason why we stopped using wind as a form of energy and started using fossil fuels, so we could decide, and nuclear power stations, so we could decide how much energy we needed to provide at any given time, knowing that lots of people put the telly on and cook their dinner and put the kettle on at 6 o'clock of an evening, and they're not using it at, say, 3 in the morning, and that they still might want to put the telly on even when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, and we might still need energy. It's almost like there was a reason why humanity went, let's use fossil fuels, and why the Industrial Revolution using fossil fuels is the reason why we have the quality of life we have now.
Yeah, well, it's quite clear that Ed Milliwatt has spent less than 0.00001 milliwatts thinking through the logic of his policies.
They must know it doesn't make sense. Do you think they're lying to us or lying to themselves?
I think they're probably lying to themselves. I think they've come up with this soundbite headline and thought that's catchy, and therefore they believe they're fitting everything else in to believe it. I've seen,
or that he genuinely believes that the world. This nonsense of Greta Thunberg stuff, none of which, by the way, is in a single reputable scientific document, certainly not IPCC reports, that the world is going to end. end, and humanity is going to end if we don't cut our fossil fuel emissions.
I have seen some very, very senior people who've created their own opinion about what they think reality is out there, and no matter what intelligence that you've given them and proved the sources and managed to repeat it time and time and time again, they still think that their opinion is right. So they lie to themselves.
But again, it's when they say, I mean, when we had a promise ahead of the last election from Labour, we will cut your energy bill by £300 a year.
And that's what we should hold them to account
and
for.
they're actually going up by £187 a year.
Yeah.
So I mean, they lie.
They've lied to us.
But you can't. If you have renewable fuel, you rely on that, as we are increasingly doing, and would have under Tories as well, because they're just as mad as Labour. They really are just. This isn't Ed Miliband. This is Tory policy. Boris Johnson pushed all this. Theresa May pushed all of this as well. They're all just as bad as each other. If you have unreliable fuels, and they know they can't possibly be in that job and think, we can store this. We've got the battery power. We don't. And there's no one in this field who thinks we're going to have it in the next 50 years. So at that point, you know you have to have backup. So at that point, you know that you are going to have double the energy availability because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. I mean, they know all that. If they don't know all that, they should be out of a job anyway.
Correct.
But if they do know all that, they know the numbers don't add up. So they must have lied to us and known they'd lied to us. That's my thing. Well, I don't like being lied to by politicians.
Yeah, they're lying to across the board. And it's not just the energy. It's we're going to smash the gangs. That'll solve everything. Well, that's not happened. We're being lied
Bless
to.
them.
It's the Chancellor turning around and saying, we cut winter fuel benefits for OAPs, and that's going to save us the billions that we need. She started off with a 22 billion black hole. Is now up to 40 to 50 billion black hole. Now that difference that difference is during the year that she has been the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and she was trying to blame the previous government for 22 billion.
You lead me in very nicely to how she's going to fill that black hole. We've got the autumn budget moved in October. The Treasury, we are told now, is considering a tax increase for landlords to boost revenue. They're targeting unearned income, because basically if you don't go out to work to do it, striving, working, then you should be taxed more on it. And they're looking at applying national insurance to rental income at the rate of 8%. That's the employee rate. In the hope of raising £2 billion. They hope that will help fill that black hole. Now, I mean, I know some people, I don't own a second home to rent out or otherwise, but a lot of people I know who do, they own just one other home. It's often it's investment, so it's money that would have been in their pension. They've used that money. They bought a home, their hope will increase in value, they're renting it out, and the rent is to cover the mortgage. Mortgages have gone up a lot, so rents have gone up. They've lost a lot of the tax benefits, council tax going up, as Angela Rayner will have discovered with her second home purchase. Some councils would be allowed to charge double council tax rates. Again, in the big scheme of things, it's not huge sums of money, a couple of £1,000 a year. If you've got a second home, you can probably afford that. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, I have to say. But an extra 8% on tax on your income. You're already paying income tax, are you not, on that income? So is that a fair thing to do? I mean, and technically not breaching the manifesto commitment not to tax working people? Well,
and what's going to happen immediately? The rents are going to go up to try and ease that, and it's going to go up disproportionately, not 8%, because to get the tax that you have to pay back, they're going to have to put it up 12, 14, 15%.
Get the extra gross money.
So it's going to affect those people that are having difficulty affording their rents at the moment.
And millions of people are in private rented accommodation in this country.
And then we're going to start seeing some landlords trying to sell off their properties, but with all of the other property taxes that are out there, the property market is stagnating at the moment, and there's going to be real difficulty in doing that.
There's talk of this capital gains tax on people selling their property. I mean, that's going to completely kill off.
We're already seeing the bond rates for the UK higher than during Liz Truss's budget, and our current Chancellor is not being held to account for that, and a lot of that is down to her policies, and these policies are just going to make that worse. I mean, again, we talk about rent controls or hitting private landlords. What do you think happens then? In every single place that this has been tried, any combination of these things, you have fewer properties available to rent, lower supply, increased demand, because we're still bringing in loads of people. What a surprise, rents go
go up. And again, that
free
hits,
money being
and that hits the people at the bottom of the market. Just final one other topic I want to get to before we go to calls. Two interesting stories about mental health. The overdiagnosing of mental health in young in the young stretches the state to the brink and is financially unsustainable in terms of the support services, costing now something like 16 billion pounds a year. So I'm just trying to find the report that this is from. This is a Policy Exchange think tank, and this comes as a woman has won a case against her employer over having ADHD, and I mean, I find this an extraordinary case. I won't name the woman, but she was an IT executive working at Capgemini, a global consultancy firm, while in her probation period. So they're not committed to even hire. She started struggling with her tasks and asked for support. She'd been diagnosed with ADHD. She was under a lot of stress, and basically, this is extraordinary. That basically a report has been issued basically saying that she, the company, an employment tribunal at London, found that they failed to provide enough neurodiversity awareness training, and this amounted to discrimination against her. We are in, I know your face right now is a picture, we are in mad territory. Yep. As far as I can see it, as I see that, someone who took on a job and couldn't hack it, for whatever reason, couldn't hack it, and therefore I don't think it's up to the company to bend themselves around her. No. I think it's up to her. If you can either do the job, you can't. And I don't know why mental health is treated any differently from physical health. If someone could do a job, an office job, but they're in a wheelchair, of course you should adapt an office. But no, you're in a wheelchair, you can't do the job of being a roofer. We're not adapting building work for someone in a wheelchair to be a roofer. So why are we adapting other high-powered IT jobs or whatever, or consultancy jobs, for people who perhaps mentally, for their whatever their mental disability, their mental health disability, whatever it is, aren't suited to that job? But this is it. We're constantly now, more and more young people in particular, but apparently women in particular, are saying they've got these diagnoses. I can go and get an ADHD diagnosis tomorrow if I pay the right person. This is crazy.
It's completely crazy. There's and it's detracting from a lot of those that are genuinely suffering from mental health issues.
And you're very open that you suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. After
genuine stress of being in war.
Yeah, I'd had a depressive illness before that as well, which masked it. But those were genuine medical diagnosis, and the trouble is, especially with kids going through school and all the rest of it now, if a child isn't statemented, then they don't get the additional help that is paid for
and
by
extra time in exams. My daughter's highly selective, private, very academic school. They all get A's and A stars. I think more than half of the children had some sort of statement saying they needed extra time in the exam. But then you know what I call that? Cheating.
Yes, but then in the private schools, a lot of those that can afford it will put the children in private schools, because the state schools will not provide and cannot provide the same level of support. But there's too many labels.
Cheating.
There's too many labels.
It's cheating. I think a lot of this does come down to the parenting. We're not building resilience. They're grabbing the child. It's like the whole, your kid falls over. You go, whoops a daisy, up you get anyway, and off you go. Otherwise now it's like, big trauma. Let's get an ice pack. We are creating children that turn into adults who can't cope with life. Also, when a third of the population has ADHD, right, at that point, well, then it's no longer a mental health issue or problem or a learning disability. It's part of being a normal human being. Yeah. Some people are more energetic than others, or some people cope with things better. You're just on the spectrum of normality, and I don't think that the rest of the world should bend to you.
Yeah. Some people are academic. Some people are practical. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. So I'm carpentry or drawing or architecture or anything.
That's probably a disability now.
Oh, well, it could be.
No, it is.
Maybe sure. Well, can I get a benefit for it?
You can definitely get a free Motability car for that.
Excellent.
I mean, seriously, this is the territory we're in. We can't afford it. It's all crazy. Yeah. We've got to. I would not be an employer ever now. I mean, genuinely, I wouldn't employ anyone now. I mean, if someone on their probation period can take you to an employment tribunal, I mean. When I ran a small company and with less than 10 employees, I had more
HR issues from one or two militant individuals that were coming through who tried to quote rule books at me, not realising that I'd actually done the right courses on the rule books.
It is all mad. Anyway, it really is. 11:29 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, and I promise we're going to get to your messages coming in on lots of the topics we're talking about. This is Talk.
Look, we have already begun a massive body of work to ensure that Nigel's first 100 days as Prime Minister are the most transformative of any Prime Minister in this country, because, my Lord, we're going to need it. We are going to need it. So what I will say is the same determinism that has gotten us to where we are as a third party to break the stranglehold of the two old parties and be setting the agenda in the way that we are is going to be applied to a big body of work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:32 is the time. Let's get some calls in quickly. Stephen is on the line. He's called up on 0344 499 1000 to have his say from Manchester. Stephen, what do you want to talk about?
I'd like to say, Julia, I'd like to, shall we say, plant a seed with you that it's time now that you declared a political career, because you've got the clear capability to connect with the man on the Clapham omnibus. You are hitting it every time. The bulk and wheel of people are basically sat there saying, yeah, wow, that's right, that's what I think.
But it is. Well, the stuff I think, I'm told I'm a sort of far-right extreme. These are majority opinions of people in this country, anyone who's paying attention.
Correct. And furthermore, this nation now, on many fronts, the green agenda, the ridiculous theme of immigration and grand-scale illegal incoming is dying. We are witnessing the beginning of the end of the British story, and we need you and the likes of you. As an old man, I would sleep easy at night if I knew that my nation was in the hands of people half as capable as you.
Well, you're very, very kind, Stephen. I have offered my services to Nigel Farage. If Reform get elected on I'm never going to be a member of a political party, but on a non-party basis, the policies they've espoused on immigration and things like Net Zero, I would like to be involved. I've said, look, I'll leave, this job, broadcasting, to go and actually do something and get the job done, because I'm not that bothered about people slagging me off on the front page of The Guardian. I've had that plenty of times before. I can live with it. Stephen, you're very, 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 very kind. We shall see what happens, eh? Anyway, let's go to Dave, who's in Southend. Dave, you want to talk about migration as well?
Yes, Julia. My thing is this. Nigel Farage, I don't trust him after what he did with the last election when he didn't stand in certain seats against Boris Johnson.
In 2019?
Yeah, I don't trust him because he shouldn't have done that deal. If he should have just gone ahead and stood. I really don't trust him, but he's going to get my vote because there is no one else. Now, down to immigration, I want them all out. I don't care if they're women and children, out. Clear this country out.
Yeah.
If they're women and children, you say to the lady, you can go, if it's Afghanistan where she come from, you can go back there, or say go to Rwanda. You've got a choice, but I want you out.
Yeah,
I don't
we'll go back to France. I'm not. That's the thing. I mean, I'm with Nigel Farage in terms of the men are my priority. There are far fewer women and children, and any women and children who stay, you can't bring a single member of your family. That's it. This all nonsense of family unification and bringing your menfolk over next week. But yeah, I'm kind of you. You knew the deal. You knew you weren't here legally. If you had kids here or brought them, you knew the deal. You don't have a right to be here.
No, I want them out. I like you just said, you have women and children. No, I want them all out. I want to clear the lot. Kids, women, all out. Get them all out of this country. I want to protect the women and children in this country. I want the lot out, and I don't care if they're women and children. Out you go. You shouldn't be here. There's a route if you want to come legally. I'm not one of those that holds my heart on my sleeve.
Yep.
Get them out.
Yeah, but again, I think the British people have hardened on this issue. They really, really have, and I think quite rightly, given the state of criminality we are seeing, the drain on public services, and the massive, massive change to our culture in recent years. Dave, appreciate that call, putting it on the line there. We're going to take another quick break, and then we are going to be talking about net zero driving up bills, but also why, extraordinarily, the Met Office may possibly be lying to us about their temperature data, because it does appear some of it is frankly invented. That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 11:39 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about net zero lunacy, as we often do on this show. Chris Morrison joins us. He's the environment editor of the Daily Sceptic. Good morning to you.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. So can you explain to us, we've talked about it this morning, but you know a lot more about this because you write about it an awful lot. Why is net zero policies, and not just Ed Miliband's, Keir Starmer's, and by the way, also the last Tory government's policy as well, why is that the reason why we've seen our energy bills going up? Well, they plan to go up in October.
Two words. I think we can start this conversation. Dale Vince, the 100% owner of Ecotricity.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show, sometimes of this parish, obviously. And he supplies Ecotricity 0.05% of the current electricity grid. And over the last 20 years, he has collected subsidies of £145 million.
That's excellent work. That's a good rate.
Yes. I ran a company myself. I mean, you always go after the low-hanging fruit. And 20 years ago, someone said, "Oh, you know these windmills that were invented around the time of Henry II, 12th century. Why don't we plaster them all over the place?" And nobody would do it as a commercial operation. But if we gave them loads and loads of money, and so I wish I'd have thought about putting a windmill up somewhere. In vast quantities of money. But this is, to be serious, this is an aggressive tax. This 145 million, because Vince is quite keen, obviously, on redistributing everybody's wealth, or rather the wealth of the rich. This 145 million that he's collected, pocketed over the years, is a regressive tax on the poor. And this is what is happening. We have got net zero that is out of control. The subsidies are out of control. £15 billion a year are loaded onto our bills. And this latest episode where Ofcom have said they've increased it, they've actually been forced to say, because the gas price is falling at the moment.
Because normally they say, well, you know, we're beholden, and Ed Miliband always says, it's the wholesale gas prices. We're dependent on all these gas-producing despots, and that's why our bills go up, which is a load of nonsense.
It's nonsense, because the wholesale price, which where we talk about the price of gas, is only a third of the price of the retail price. And the rest of it is all these horrendous, or much of it is the cost of the grid, the subsidies, and all of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
This particular thing, I think Ofcom noted that we were turning off power in all these obscure places that we have to put wind farms like the Shetlands, where the wind is blowing, but obviously nobody lives there. We just don't have the grid, and we never probably will, because it would be horrendously expensive, and there's all sorts of delays in cables and transformers, and we certainly won't get it by 2030, that we're having to shut off. We're building all these farms with these enormous subsidies, and then we're having to pay them billions in order to shut off at certain times.
So we pay them to build the farms. By the way, the wind turbines, they're the ugliest things on the landscape. I would fell every single one tomorrow if it was up to me. But they're built on the other side of the world, largely in China, along with the solar panels, in factories that are powered largely by coal, one of the dirtiest forms of fossil fuel energy. They're then shipped over in tankers powered by diesel, oil, whatever, to the UK. They only have a life of about 10 years, and then God knows where we're going to put them all. But we're then paying to turn them off when the wind is blowing too much and when the wind doesn't blow. I'm almost thinking that this isn't a sensible policy, Chris.
It's a Ponzi scheme. I mean, in a former life, I was a financial journalist, and I covered the decline of Lloyd's during the 1980s, where they went from 2,000 investors to 20,000, and the way they were skimming the reinsurance off into shady places, sunny places with shady people, would have drawn the breath of the mafia in skimming. Las Vegas.
And the same with green energy. I mean, we're not imputing the honesty of anyone in particular. I need to stress that for legal reasons. But again, the money's there. People spend it. Do you think that Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer, as much as he pays attention to detail, do you think Ed Miliband knows that the numbers don't add up and he hasn't got a chance in hell of achieving his net zero target? It's not 100% of electricity being produced without fossil fuels. Well, net zero fossil fuels by 2030 is now 95%. Do you think he knows that he can't do it, and he knows that it's all a complete con and unachievable and impossible and overpriced? Or do you think he actually believes it?
Well, I assume he's got more than one brain cell, so he can do the
big assumption there.
It's a bit. Well, let's assume that he's a man of a certain amount of intelligence, if somewhat misguided. He must know. He must be able to see the figures. But he's a zealot. He's a Greta.
Yeah.
He's a Boris Johnson, quite frankly, who got at by who knows who when he came.
Wife.
By his wife, maybe, yes. So people say, but also, a lot of people who are around him, the Met Office, the scientists, all these people, all the activists, and so he is a zealot. He doesn't care. Remember that the Labour Party no longer really speaks for the working class. It's no longer a working class party. They kind of dislike the working class, or put it this way, they like the working class less than they like soaking the rich. They hate the rich.
There is that, isn't there? Well, look, you mentioned the Met Office. That's another story I want to talk to you about, because it's leading item. You have a morning newsletter, the Daily Scepter, which is one of my first reads of the day, and this is a topic that you guys have covered an awful lot with the help of a correspondent and this is about the UK Met Office and their claims, of course, again and again. Hottest summer ever, hottest winter ever. This reached this temperature, according to this weather station, the like, and basically the evidence is. We're in smoking gun territory now. The Met Office at the UK, which where we get all our weather data, this is definitive. What is the temperature on my phone? The Met Office has told me what it is. They have over 100 non-existent weather stations where they estimate temperature using what they call well-correlated neighbouring sites. But now it appears that quite a lot of these, there isn't a neighbouring site, and it would appear that they're just simply making up the numbers. Tell us first of all about these non-existent weather stations and the weather stations which are perhaps of dubious value.
Well, the dubious value is that, if you want your hottest summer ever, you just use their 380 actual weather stations, which we wrote a story. We first started off a year ago when we did a Freedom of Information Act, and we found that 80% of their weather stations are in what I call junk classes 3 and 4. These are World Meteorological Organization gradings based on how near they are to unnatural heat sources such as airports and this kind of thing. 48% were in class 4, which comes with uncertainties, possible errors of 2 centigrade, and the 29% were in class 5 with 29%. They have just told us that the hottest summers ever is 16.19 centigrade. So they are using these junk sites that have errors up between 2 and 5 centigrade to tell us that we've had the hottest summer ever down to 1/100 of a degree.
Right, so we have a tiny increase in the top temperature, often recorded at Heathrow. Oh, 2 jumbo jets took off. What a surprise. It was extra hot at that moment. And yet the weather stations that are producing that data are simply not calibrated to actually be able to give that sort of level of accuracy. So they could be out by 5 degrees or not. I mean, that's crazy. But there's also the issue that some of the weather stations they claim to be getting information from don't actually exist. They've been closed down years ago.
This is another one. They also keep monthly averages for a whole load of stations. So if you go into their public domain website, you can type in, say, Lowestoft, and you will see a station identified as Lowestoft. Lowestoft closed in 2010. So what they then do is they give you 5 nearby stations, all of which are closed. Now, what do? They say, the correspondent you're referring to is a guy called Ray Sanders, who's devoting his retirement to...
Great job, Ray. Service to the people.
As the people. He's going through every single one of these websites, and he's pointing out the deficiencies. And he's pointing out that he's using the Freedom of Information Act, and the Met Office eventually got fed up and said they weren't going to answer anymore because they were vexatious and not in the public interest. Yeah, what Ray was doing was that he was asking for the Met Office to say that they estimate these sites like Lowestoft from well-corroborated neighbouring stations.
But so they won't say which ones they are, and some of them we know are definitely not in existence. I mean, this is an extraordinary scandal, an absolute scandal, that the scientific data that we're told is the basis of these claims could possibly be being made up. And the Met Office can clearly clear this up very simply by providing all the information, which we would implore them to do right now if they're watching. Chris Morrison, time's against us. Thank you. You've explained that brilliantly. Environment editor at the Daily Sceptic, Chris Morrison. Very brief word from Philip Ingram. I mean, look, you're a military man. You rely on clear data. This is looking very fishy.
It is very fishy, but again, the Met Office could easily explain this by turning around and saying we're using other means to gather that data. The satellites
making it up sometimes.
Well, no, but the satellite data that exists there can take spot temperatures at any part of the planet.
Well, then they should say that's what they're doing.
They should say that
if that's what they're doing.
Exactly.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000. It's possible that people are not giving us the full facts on this. Let's go that far. 11:49 is the time. We're certainly not getting the full information and the full about recorded crimes. A huge number of crimes simply are not being recorded, according to a new report. Well, we're going to talk to a former New Scotland Yard officer, Roy Ram, about that up next. This is Talk.
I think they genuinely believe that all that was needed for the British economy was to kick out the Tories and to put the Labour hierarchy at the top table, and things would suddenly come good. Turns out that's not how things work economically. You actually need to have an economic strategy. There isn't one here. There are just wishes from the Labour
Exactly right. And it turns out as well, the stories in the Sun this morning, unemployment's going to reach highest levels since the COVID pandemic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 11:52. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Philip Pickham's still with me. Get your thoughts on what our next guest has to say. More than 280,000 crimes went unrecorded last year, with the logging of antisocial behaviour particularly unacceptably low. Who's saying this? Well, the Police Inspectorate, a report by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, found that only 51.9%, so 52% of crimes classed as antisocial behaviour targeting a specific individual or group were actually recorded between 2021 and 2025, and many other crimes are not recorded as well. Well, let's talk about this with Roy Ram. He's a former commander of specialist operations at New Scotland Yard. Morning to you, Roy.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I'm probably being incredibly naive here. I would have thought if I report a crime, whether it's, a murder or antisocial behaviour or shoplifting or whatever, that the police have to record that crime. Now, we know they often don't do anything about it. They don't bother investigating it. But But don't they have to record it at least?
Yeah, they do. I think, to be fair to the cops here, they've got better. The actual recording mechanism is by no means straightforward, and they're now recording nearly 95% of all crime, and that's up from 80% just a year ago. So they're moving in the right direction.
Hold on a minute. 95% of reported crime. How does someone getting in touch with the police? I mean, often you have to do it. You can't go to a local police station. Now you have to do it online. And you say, I'm reporting this. I say I had my bag stolen June last year. But my bag stolen. How could they not record that?
I think they are recording, but they're not getting it into the data system properly, and that's the worry, Julia, because chief officers and us, we all need to know exactly what the crime numbers are, so that we can put resources in the right places, and this is really, really very significant, because we're talking about vast numbers here. The number you quoted, 280,000 crimes.
I think it's way more than that.
Well, it probably is, but don't forget, we've already got 9.5 million reported crimes, so somewhere in a region of 10 million crimes a year, and that's very, very important, because we need to confront politicians with that when we're talking about the resources that are being.
What our priorities are, and whether any particular crime is on the up or on the. And that's the thing. We had Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, a couple of weeks ago, putting out some stats, very carefully chosen. Crime is falling in these few specific areas, ignoring all the areas where crime was going up. 40% of all mobile phones stolen in Europe, apparently stolen in London. Well done us. We're constantly told that crime surveys say that crime is on the downward slope. But it's certainly not what most people experience in their day-to-day lives. I don't think I know a single person who doesn't know someone who's had their phone, their bag stolen, attempted break-in, been assaulted, or anything like that. And yet we're told, no, we're less crime-ridden than we ever were.
Well, I think that's a convenience for politicians who are worried about the cost of it, because if we look at population increase over the last 10 years, we've got nearly 4 million recorded people in the UK, probably more than that. So population's increased by 4 million, but police are still at 2003 levels.
Yeah.
And when we look at the complexity of crime, so for example, in the HMI's report, they cite the number of frauds, for example.
And online, it's very difficult to police that.
And it's very difficult to investigate. This is not, something that one constable can do in a few hours. These are very complicated issues. So the simple fact is there aren't enough resources being dedicated to crime investigation, particularly assaults against women and girls, and particularly against online fraud.
But again, things like shoplifting, stuff that would be easy to solve, because and you're talking to my local high street shop owners, they will say, we know the identities of the people, we've got them red-handed, we've got them in CCTV. If the police turn up, they don't bother arresting them. Even if they do, they'll get a slap on the wrist, nothing happens. And then you get more and more crime and more issues. But actually, you could kind of resolve the issue very quickly by those people being, I don't know, mad idea, crazy idea, put in prison.
Well, I think the criminal justice system needs to evolve to have something like 24-hour courts in big cities like London, where somebody who's arrested faces justice the next morning and is dealt with quickly. What happens now is that someone's arrested, possibly, or cautioned in the street, but if they are arrested and taken to a police station, they're not likely to face a magistrate's court for months. And then over that time, some clever defence will be invented, and we don't.
And everyone loses interest, and the witness statements are then out of date. Or in the case of the man who allegedly stole my bag, just simply not turn up to court.
For sure, but if you were there if you were held in custody, to appear the next morning. And also give police the chance to do some research into their background. It has to change, Julia.
Yeah, it really, really does. Roy Ram, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Philip Ingram, I mean, I mean, when we talk about this, we talk about the crimes that have been reported, not recorded. There's actually a huge number of people who don't report crimes. Now, I've got contents insurance, but if you don't have insurance, not much point reporting a crime that you don't think is going to be investigated by the police, whether it's your phone, your bag, or whatever.
Yeah, and as Roy said, if the statistics aren't recorded properly, then the government can't allocate the right resources to the police so that they can increase, and the chief constables and chief officers don't understand where they need to put their priorities and everything else, so it all starts to fall apart. And one of the problems here is, HMIC, FRS, Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services are very good at producing some very comprehensive reports, but they've got no authority and following them up. And
we had these police and crime commissioners who were supposed to be elected by the people who were supposed to sort of basically hold chief constables to account and make them follow they're supposed to follow priorities of the public. They never seem to actually do that, with a few rare exceptions. The priorities that we've got, which are about, frankly, about what is going on our streets. It's absolutely a top priority. But these crimes aren't even being recorded, let alone even being investigated. What do you expect? Anyway, going to take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking more about deportation. There's asylum, hotels, plenty more besides. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Lots more to talk about. If you've missed anything of the show, don't forget you can go to my YouTube page. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show is what we called it, so you can find it nice and easily. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, going to be talking more about this absolutely daft report from the Refugee Council recommending to the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper that basically we could end the use of migrant hotels by March with a one-off scheme providing temporary permission for asylum seekers from 5 key countries to stay, including Afghans, Syrians and Eritreans. Those basically got the highest asylum success rate, so you may as well, while you're processing their claims, let them work and rent homes anyway. what could possibly go wrong with how that would offer yet more of a carrot and absolutely zero stick to people wanting to come across from France. I wonder if some of them might actually lie and pretend to be from those countries as well. I know, wouldn't that be a shocker? Meanwhile, growing backlash to Keir Starmer over his from senior Labour figures who want the European Convention on Human Rights to be reformed so that more migrants can be deported, and also demands, by the way, for his very senior advisor, Lord Hermer, to be out of a job. We'll talk about that as well. Plus, overdiagnosis of mental health conditions, according to a new policy paper by Policy Exchange, the think tank. They're saying overdiagnosis in young people of these mental health conditions is stretching the state to breaking point. They're costing £16 billion a year in support services. And according to this report, basically, it's financially unsustainable. Tell us something we don't know. Plus, one of the world's largest drug makers has halted the sale of the weight loss job Manjaro to cope with soaring demand. A pause was introduced yesterday, and it's going to remain in place until next week. And it comes ahead of a planned increase in the wholesale price of the weight loss jab, which is the one that most Britons are on in this country, 9 out of 10 paying privately for it. Quite rightly. It's going to cost between 133 quid and 330 pounds per injection in the UK. But don't worry, you're saving all that money on the takeaways, people, so you can afford to do it yourself. And we're asking about that a little bit later in the show. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. If you want to get in touch, it'd be great to get your call on air. We've been asking you about the mad net zero policies that have been blamed for the shock rise in our energy bills that's going to come in place in October. That's off, Jem has explained to us. Also, the return of one of the ISIS Beatles, possibly, who beheaded, including American journalists and others, and a British aid worker as well back in 2014. One of them wants to return to the UK. And of course, we've got this Court of Appeal case today. The Home Office and the hotel chain, which owns the Bell Hotel in Epping, they are appealing against an injunction, basically a temporary injunction, a ruling that basically says those asylum seekers at that Bell Hotel have to be removed from there. Interestingly, hotel owners, this is Somani Hotels, their lawyers have said that the injunction set a dangerous precedent and says the hardship caused to the 138 asylum seekers at the hotel should be a reason to reverse the injunction. They said that they argued the perceived risk of housing migrants in Epping is fuelled by disinformation on social media. And the lawyers have warned of a rush of similar applications from other councils which will follow. Very likely, Tories and the Reform are advising their councils to bring in exactly the same sort of challenges there, along the same lines, which is basically you didn't get planning permission to change from being a hotel to effectively a hostel for asylum seekers. But what is interesting, talking about disinformation on social media, we've got a court case going on right now involving allegations of sexual assault made against an asylum seeker in one of these hotels. That's a court case now that we decided by a judge and a jury, but nevertheless, that's not disinformation, is it? Because there was enough evidence to bring the case in the first place. Well, let's talk about all of this. Philip Ingram is joining me. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. Just before we get to our first guest, just on this issue, on this injunction, hotel owners say it's a dangerous precedent. We know the Home Office want to join in on this case, basically saying, look, although our official policy is to get channel migrants out of hotels, we actually don't want to be forced to get them out of hotels by local councils saying you're breaking planning rules to get them out. I mean, that's the sort of insane territory we're in. But should we be getting these people out of hotels?
Yes, I think we should be putting them in camps. You know, we should not be paying for them to have four-star accommodation or be put into the communities where they're disrupting life in the local communities whilst they're being processed for asylum. You know, we hold them in camps. That's better than the quality accommodation that they had in Calais waiting to come across. Military personnel will stay in camps for 6, 8, 9, 12 months, and that's acceptable.
We'll put them in worse conditions.
Exactly.
Than these asylum
so put them in there, and we can then look after them.
But Labour's not going to do that. Labour's going to put them into local, hostels.
And that's going to cause even more problems. And actually, if the lawyers are turning around and saying, "Oh, this is going to set a dangerous precedent," then they're ignoring the actual legal bit that has been argued on, which is the planning rules were not followed, and therefore it sounds as if they haven't got a leg to stand on.
Well, we shall see.
Goodness.
Well, let's talk about this with my next guest. Stuart Jackson, now a peer. Lord Jackson is former Chief of Staff to the Brexit Secretary, as was David Davis, and joins us right now. Good afternoon to you, Lord Jackson.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just talk first of all about this Asylum hotel, this ruling in Epping at the Bell Hotel. This was the start of a lot of protests after allegations were made of sexual assault allegedly carried out by two men in that hotel. One of those is, certainly both are live cases. One, a case that's actually in the courts right now and has been this week. Not disinformation, as it's claimed in the court today, certainly in terms of what the jury is hearing. But they're saying, look, this is setting a dangerous precedent and we shouldn't be moving these people out of hotels. Should we be moving them out of hotels or not?
No, we shouldn't. And we absolutely have to have a proper strategy for stopping people coming. We did have that with the Rwanda scheme.
No, we didn't. It's a load of nonsense. No, we didn't. Moving 200 people to Rwanda wasn't going to stop people getting on boats.
It was going to be a significant impact in terms of people knowing that they would be refused entry on a permanent basis to the UK. We spent a lot of money on it. Julia, I served on the committee. I was in Parliament. I know the
250 people.
It was
250 people being sent to Rwanda was not going to deter 28,000 people arriving.
Look, it was not going to be 250. The scheme never had a chance to get going. It was scrapped, right? It was not a perfect scheme, but it was a way to deter people from coming to the UK because it was a powerful message to say to them, you will not be able to permanently settle in the UK.
But they would,
you will
because there was no plan to upscale the scheme.
Third-party country.
There was no plan to upscale the scheme. You know that as well as I do.
The inherent merit of the scheme is such that the Labour Party is now scrabbling, for instance, grovelling to the Prime Minister of Albania in May to see if he would be a partner to the scheme, and he refused because he's already doing the same with Italy. Yeah. So we're going to have to disagree on this. Was it a perfect scheme? No. But it was a policy that had an opportunity and the chance to work. Labour scrapped it. And the bigger issue is that they don't have a plan B. They are now intending to disregard local housing need and put asylum seekers into much needed local authority housing, take over private residential areas to create houses in multiple occupation. This will exacerbate community tension.
That's my view.
It will cause a great deal of anger.
But the main thing is that for the Home Secretary, you lose that one place of focus where we've seen protests and it's been across the newspapers, and you can just spread these people out and they just hope we won't notice. So you're saying you don't want them in the hotels, but you don't want them in the local community. Do you then support Nigel Farage's policy? It's certainly not the policy of your party as a Conservative. Not now, maybe at some point in the future, of putting these people into detainment camps.
Yeah, I think it's the only way we can deter people from coming and break the business model of the evil people traffickers is to do that, because at the moment we have a very significant problem with lack of housing. The ministers constantly tell us that they are communicating and collaborating with local authorities, with the NHS, with the police. They're not at all. They're dumping large numbers of these young men who are waiting for an asylum determination into local communities. They're ignoring elected representatives such as Epping Forest District Council. And just to come back on the specific point you raised, Julia, they haven't got a leg to stand on in this respect because they did not seek planning permission. Yeah. And they are not above the law. Everyone else has to seek a change of use planning permission. Yeah. They didn't, and they have to suck it up, frankly. And those other asylum hotels or hostels across the country in a similar position will also find themselves at odds with planning law and will more likely have to close as well. That is the law.
But hold on a minute. They're only going to do it. So, for instance, I mentioned earlier, I live in North London, Labour-run council, Camden. There's an asylum hotel I only discovered a few weeks ago. It's a short walk from my home. But I don't think the Labour Council is going to want to close it down because presumably they knew it was happening. They didn't bother telling local residents. They'll tell us about a cycle scheme, but not that, obviously. It wasn't in the local paper or anything. But Conservative councillors had a meeting on Zoom with Kemi Badenoch, your Tory leader, this week, basically saying, look, we want you to challenge these hotels. We know Reform are doing that as well. But if you do that, they're not going into detainment camps. They're going to be going into the local community.
Well, you have to balance the greater good of the general public and public policy. And I do think that the government now is in a terrible mess. The people that they say they've removed are voluntarily
but that's not the point. You said you want them out of their hotels, but you don't want them in local accommodation. Well, that's the only other option under this Labour government. So which do you want then?
Well, the Conservative government, which wasn't perfect by any means in this area, in this policy area, did look at Ministry of Defence, disused Ministry of Defence facilities and other public accommodation facilities, disused hospitals, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know they did, but we never got there. In terms of, we've got a Labour government until 2029, realistically.
Julia, if you give me the chance.
Well, no, but you're not answering the question I asked you.
I am attempting to answer the question. Bear with me. I mean, I know you're a North London Liberal from Camden, but please bear with me.
That's what I'm
saying is we're in a national emergency and a national crisis. So first of all, I think they have to disapply the European Convention on Human Rights because it is a national...
It's not the question I asked you. We can come on to that. Answer the question I asked you. You said you don't want them in their hotels. Your party leader is saying get them out of their hotels. But you know they're not going to be detained and they're not going to go to Rwanda. They're going to go into local accommodation. And you say you don't want that. So which is it? Do you want them in local accommodation or do you want them in hotels?
I want them in an alternative accommodation, such as former Ministry of Defence.
Yeah, but the government's not going to do that. Labour's not going to do that.
That's what I'm saying. That is my position.
So, given the two choices we have, would it be better for the Tories and the Reform not to push for the closure of these asylum hotels, so that these people are not spread out in the community? We don't know where they are, and using up scarce private rented accommodation.
No, because it's an issue of public trust and accountability. This government was elected on the basis of closing asylum hotels. They're increasing the number of them. They're also surreptitiously moving people into social housing stock and HMOs. And this is fundamentally, politically, morally, ethically, economically, socially wrong. And therefore, they have to, as a matter of emergency, disapply the ECHR. They need to very quickly, if they can put a Nightingale hospital up in less than a week, they can put a Nightingale barracks up. I'm not talking about uncivilised, indecent behaviour to these people. I'm talking about it being a national emergency. That's my policy. Yeah. It is not yet the policy of my own party. I hope it will be. But the current situation is unsustainable. This government was elected on a mandate to deal with this issue. It rightly criticised the former government for its inaction and lack of policy imagination on this issue. It now has 14 months to do something about it, and it hasn't. It's got no policy, and it needs to act with a degree of alacrity and emergency because this is a national emergency.
But they're not going to. We know that. This is not in their psychological, mental, intellectual makeup. This is not where they stand on this. Sounds to me like you actually are supporting Reform's policy on this, as announced by Nigel Farage this week.
Well, yeah, I am, yeah. It doesn't mean I'm a member of Reform, but, you know, sometimes Labour does something that I will agree with. Very rarely the Liberal Democrats do, but the Labour Party do, Reform does, and you have to... That's what politics is about. If someone says something that you agree with, we're not a bunch of playground kids, we're a tribe. You know, in the national interest, that is the best thing to do at the moment.
What do you make of this report by the Refugee Council? It's recommended to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and my God, she's probably going to agree to this, to end the use of migrant hotels. They said you could get rid of them basically by March because something like, I mean, a huge percentage of those people who arrive here are from Syria, Eritrea, Sudan, Afghanistan, and saying that those particular 5 nationalities who've got a very, very high rate of acceptance, I think 4 out of 10 of those who are actually coming across of those nationalities or claiming to be. They've got such high asylum success rates. You may as well allow them, you know, temporary leave to remain. They say with a lot of, security vetting. Of course there will be. Not. They should be allowed to go to work legally, pay tax, rent their own homes while their claims are being processed. Can you see anything wrong with this policy? Apart from everything.
That's a deeply ironical question, Julia. I mean, it's a bonkers proposal, and what you expect from the Refugee Council. I mean, their policy can be summed up by open the doors to the whole world, irrespective of anything. You know, what this does is absolutely undermine the real the real faith and trust people should have in the immigration system, that we will let people in who have an abiding and enduring fear of violence and being treated badly by their home country, and to throw the doors open to everyone. First of all, in terms of public expenditure, it's crazy. Community relations, it's mad. And I absolutely do not believe the government is in a position to properly vet and do security checks on all these. The proportion of young men is huge. You know, we do not want to open the doors to thousands of people of which we know nothing. It's crazy.
I mean, quite apart
no
from
one
the
would
fact
do
that
it.
this would just be a new market for the smuggling gangs, because, hey, you can come in and work. By the way, don't forget to claim you're one of these 5 countries. You mentioned the ECHR, European Convention on Human Rights, I assume you were referring to. There's a lot of demand for even Labour, big wigs saying, look, it's time to deal with the European Convention on Human Rights, whether temporarily suspending it, whether leaving it, whether reforming it. Is that the answer? And is that, necessary but not sufficient, or is it enough?
No, it's not sufficient. But I think in the very short term, we need to disapply some parts of it, because it's being misused by the judiciary to keep people in this country who should be removed, who are criminals, who are a threat to the good order and public safety. And it's being misused. People claiming that they're gay, people claiming that they're subject to political persecution. I mean, it just doesn't work. It was to deal with the horrific aftermath of the Second World War and the Holocaust. The 1951 Convention is in a different era, before mass communications, mass travel, mobile phones, people trafficking gangs. We really need a reset on this. It doesn't mean we're turning our back on the rule of law and international rules-based regimes, but it does mean we have to look out for what's in the best interest of the UK. And at the moment, the ECHR and our activist judiciary, or parts of them, are making it actually unworkable for the UK and actually dangerous.
Well, let me mention just one other final story here, and this is regarding Lord Hermer, and he's the Attorney General, and again another human rights lawyer, big old mate of Keir Starmer, and apparently seeming to have the most extraordinary influence on government policy. Indeed, he's now got basically, government lawyers in every department. Basically, you have to flag anything to me that might be a problem. But Graham Stringer is the first Labour MP to publicly come out against the Attorney General, accusing him of putting international treaties above democracy and also trying to seize control of the government's agenda. And one of the interesting things the Attorney General had said back in May, he had to apologise after he'd likened criticism of the European Convention on Human Rights to 1930s Germany, and also, of course, spending tens of billions of taxpayers' money on the surrender of the Chagos Islands. But do you share Graham Stringer, the Labour MP's concerns?
I work on the basis that pretty much everything Graham Stringer says is right. He's one of the very few
strong Brexiteer.
Yeah, he's a top Brexiteer. He's right about Hermer. Hermer's not even won a goldfish at the fair. He's never been elected to anything. He's been planted in the centre of government. He seems to have a veto on most policies. He makes a fetish of international law and international legal regimes. He's not pragmatic and practical in the way that those work in government. And I think he's becoming an embarrassment to the Labour government. And on that basis, I think Starmer, although he's a friend of Lord Hermer's, would be wise to give the portfolio to someone in the House of Commons who is much more accountable, because we don't know, for instance, how deeply involved Lord Hermer was in the Chagos Islands debacle, which is going to cost the taxpayer a huge amount of money. I think that will be subject of some kind of inquiry in the future, that policy and that decision. But Hermer, I think, very clever man, agreeable on a personal basis, but not really the right person to be Attorney General, and too much of a human rights North London Liberal zealot. Yeah. And on that basis, I think he should step aside.
Interesting to that. We started off the conversation about that appeal at the Court of Appeal from the Home Office, and indeed the hotel owners, about the Bell Hotel in Epping. Just had some copy through from the Telegraph saying The Home Office lawyers have said the rights of asylum seekers are more important than those of Epping Council. Making submissions to the Court of Appeal on behalf of the Home Secretary, lawyers for the Home Office said the relevant public interests in play are not equal and are fundamentally different in nature. And the Home Office argued that housing asylum seekers was in the national interest. What do you make of those comments?
Well, it's absolutely insane. It's a sort of ridiculous Alice in Wonderland nonsense from a government that's hugely out of touch, is incompetent, is wrecking the economy, and they don't care about what people think, ordinary voters. For them, all they care about is these international legal shibboleths, and it says a million things that they care more about people who've never paid a penny in taxes to this country, who've turned up claiming to be asylum seekers, but we know they're economic migrants, some of whom are involved in criminal activity. They are more important to this Labour government than honest, decent, tax-paying citizens of all colours, of all creeds, of all backgrounds. And I think this is going to catch up with Labour eventually.
I agree with you on that.
Electoral downfall.
Lord Jackson, really appreciate joining us, Conservative peer, former Chief of Staff to the Brexit Secretary, all those heady days, the Brexit Secretary, they were lively and fun, weren't they? Thank you very much indeed for that. Philip Ingram, fascinating, just that final thing. I mean, there's this copy that it doesn't actually have in quotes the rights of asylum seekers are more important than those of Epping Council, but basically saying relevant public interests are in play, are not equal and are fundamentally different in nature. So they're basically saying housing asylum seekers is more important and it's in the national interest than the people of Epping who don't want the asylum seekers housed there.
Well, what they're trying to say is that the housing is more important than the laws that's written at the moment. The government has got a majority. They need to go and change the law.
But also the planning permission thing. You didn't get planning permission to change the meaning. Again.
So that's free for all for everyone.
Well, exactly. In that case, I wouldn't have bothered for me conservatory or my shed.
Exactly. and I agree everything with Lord Jackson said. But putting the asylum seekers out into the local community, there isn't the accommodation in the local community, so it's going to force central government to have to find an alternative. And the European Convention on Human Rights doesn't mandate 4-star hotels or houses of multiple occupancy. You can build a United Nations High Commission for Refugees standard of camp that is acceptable in any part of the world because they are refugees, they say, and put them in there.
And the key thing is not being able to go and do your Uber deliveries and your Deliveroo deliveries and earning money on the black market.
And keep them securely in there.
Love to hear your thoughts on this, folks. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get your calls up next. 12:25 is the time. This is Talk.
I think they genuinely believe that all that was needed for the British economy was to kick out the Tories and to put the Labour hierarchy at the top table, and things would suddenly come good. Turns out that's not how things work economically. You actually need to have an economic strategy. There isn't one here. There are just wishes from the Labour
Exactly right. And it turns out as well, the stories in the Sun this morning, unemployment's going to reach highest levels since the COVID pandemic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good, afternoon to you. 12:28 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Herbie is on the line. He's in Harrow. Herbie, what do you want to say?
What I want to say, Juliet, is that how much is the actual cost of these asylum seekers costing us? Because you've got added security, added fencing, and added everything else. What is the actual true cost? Will the government please tell me how much is hemorrhaging?
They'll be putting it in. They'll be putting, and also the NHS costs. We know it's in the billions. We know it's in the hundreds of millions every single day, and that's the only bit we know. But you're right. When I went to the local hotel in my area, I had the asylum seekers housing in it, and I mean there were at least 3 security guards there. They certainly weren't going to let me in. I can tell you that.
But then they got the fencing and everything else on top of it, you know, and transport and everything. We really do not know how much is hemorrhaging from our taxpayers' pockets to pay for these people who are illegal.
Yeah, they don't want us to know, Herbie. That's why we don't know.
We need to find out, Julie. It's time for us to say enough's enough. We want to know what is the actual true cost that this is costing the nation.
The aim of getting people out of hotels, the cunning wheeze about that, even though absurdly Yvette Cooper is fighting getting people out of hotels in Epping in the court right today, is that they want to put people in local communities, and then it's local rent, and then you can do it via the local councils, and then it won't show up as one big figure. The problem with the hotels is you can see where they are once we actually were allowed to find out where they were, and then you can actually see the actual cost, and there's a one big hotel bill. They just don't want us to know.
Well, it's time that we did. I mean, to say, I think the nation's now crying. That's it. That's it.
Yep, we're done.
We've got to stop it.
Exactly, and it's not a right-wing thing. It's a we are done. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, our bleeding hearts have closed now. We've dried up. We're done. Herbie, thank you for that. Couldn't agree with you more. Joe is in Bournemouth. Also wants to have his say on migration. Morning to you. Afternoon to you. Sorry. Joe, are you there? Joe, hello. Oh, haven't got him there. Right, I'm going to get to some texts and tweets very quickly before we go to another break. These are about Ed Miliband's mad net zero policies, which have been blamed not just by me, but by actual Ofgem, the regulator, for that shock rise in energy bills that's going to see millions pay more this winter. Lucy says, I can only pay what I can. This nonsense needs to stop now. Cal says Miliband needs to be sacked, and this whole farce he's pulling to waste millions of taxpayers' money stopped. Enough is enough. Bernie says if Starmer wanted to try and curtail his major fall in popularity, dumping Miliband could be a step in that direction. Yeah, but Keir Starmer is keeping Miliband and he's keeping Rachel Reeves in place because they're basically going to be his foremen and women as and when the time comes. Carl says, I mean, anyone with an ounce of common sense has been saying this for years now. I've always said I'd vote for any party that scraps the whole thing, which is just what Reform have pledged to do. And Kenny says, if these lunatics are not stopped, then the United Kingdom will be bankrupt by the time they are kicked out. Oh, I think we've got Joe back. Joe, hello. You there now?
Hello there.
Oh, on a very bad line. We'll try and persevere. Joe, what do you want to say, my love, very quickly?
Well, we're in Bournemouth, not about hotels. The reason they're in hotels is that there is shut them there, isn't it?
Joe, I'm so sorry. I can barely understand you. Can you move a yard to the right and see if that works?
We're in the New Forest.
No, I can't. It doesn't. Darn, we're going to have to give up. I'm so sorry, Joe. I really apologise, but it's just impossible to understand. 12:32 is the time. Coming up next, we are going to talk about the overdiagnosis of mental health problems, particularly in the young, why it's unaffordable, why a woman was able to win a case against her employer, even for ADHD, even though she was on probation. Oh, yeah, and why you're going to have to pay more for your weight loss jab. Or, I know this is a mad idea, could just eat less. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:35 is the time. Let's turn our attention right now to, well, overdiagnosis of mental health problems. It's something we've spoken about on the show many, many times. Philip Ingram still with me. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. And as we discussed a little bit earlier in the show, you're someone you've spoken very openly. You had depression, you suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder after serving in war. I think a lot of people can understand why these are very serious issues. You need to get the mental health treatment that you need, and you need it quickly, and that we should be helping people in your scenario, especially those who've gone through horrific conflict that has seen this. But how do you feel about the idea? I mean, so many young people now looking at £16 billion a year support services for children and young people every year now for mental health conditions. I mean, this is unsustainable, isn't it?
Completely unsustainable, and we're applying too many labels that we're putting under a mental health banner to too many different supposed conditions that are coming through. When mental health is like physical health, there's an issue that's there. You identify what the causes are of it, you come up with a treatment plan, and you can either treat it successfully so the individual learns how to deal with it, or you can cure it. Yeah. If you're putting a permanent label on people, then
I don't think this is helpful.
It's not helpful.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about this with Professor Carol Sikora right now. He's medical director of Rutherford Cancer Centres and joins us. Very, very good afternoon to you, Carol.
Good afternoon, Julia.
It's very interesting. I mean, I first got to know you during lockdown when you were one of the very few voices in the early weeks speaking out about the shutting down of medical care for cancer cases while the NHS was treating COVID cases and ignoring all the far younger people with far many more years of their life who were being completely untreated for cancer. You're also one of the few people speaking out very early on about the dangers for young people of being locked down, missing out on university, missing out on school. And I think we're seeing an awful lot of that play out now, aren't we?
I think we are. The problem with mental health, it's very difficult to measure. Psychiatry as a specialty is one of the most challenging to do because there are very few measurements. In cancer, which is my specialty, you measure the tumours either getting bigger, smaller, or disappearing, and you hope the latter. In heart
and you can know if a cure works because someone's either living or they're not living.
Exactly. So, medicine's an exact science for most disciplines, but when it comes to the mind, it's much more challenging. Yeah. And it's a story between the patient and the health professional. You have to come to a conclusion. The other problem is people love diagnostic labels. We overdiagnose things. We overdiagnose ADHD, for example. I'm sure we do, because there's no measurement for it.
Well, wait a minute. We're told we've underdiagnosed it. One of the main groups of people who are now getting diagnosed for it are older women, adult women, saying they've been underdiagnosed. But we're getting to the point where so many people are now being diagnosed with ADHD. It's just a normal spectrum of human behaviour now, isn't it?
It is. And this word spectrum is exactly right for psychiatric disorders. They're not really disorders. All of us get depressed now and again. I'm sure you do. The system's not working, that's raining outside, you've got other things to do.
But I would use the word down, like, I'm a bit tired, I'm having a down day. I wouldn't use the word depressed.
No. You're right, but some people would. And then the other spectrum, when people are morbidly depressed, and I've seen people that are really ill with depression, and that's one end. But there's everything in between on a spectrum. And the treatments for the very severe mentally ill patients are one thing, and we have those, and we're quite good at it in the UK compared to many other countries. But when it comes to overdiagnosis, especially for disease, there's not much you can do. There's really not much you can do. There may be some pills.
But that's it. A lot of it is medicalising. A lot of it is putting labels on. A lot of people are saying they're looking for an explanation of why they are how they are. But again, seeing it as a problem as opposed to, yes, you might be a bit more hyperactive than other people. You might have a lower attention threshold. But you can have totally normal children, one of whom can sit and read a book happily for 2 hours, and one of whom can't manage more than 5 minutes. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They're just on that spectrum. But there is such an urge now. There are an awful lot of people who are, let's face it, swinging the lead on the benefits, who they know they can claim extra benefits if their child is diagnosed with things like ADHD. There are a lot of very loving parents who desperately need their children. They really struggle to get their children I used to use the phrase statemented. It's a different form now, to get them the extra help they need with reading and writing. A lot of that, again, failure of teaching and they're not actually teaching the right way. But there's also a lot, and I've seen a lot of it, people, middle-class parents who are just basically cheating and getting their kids extra attention, extra learning and extra exam time. And a lot of it is excuse-making. Because I know a doctor who said to me that they had... repeatedly had parents saying, well, I think my kid's got ADHD, I think my kid's got this or that problem. And what they said was, can you write a food diary and a sleep diary and things like that? I want to have an idea. You know, you're giving your kid a packet of biscuits at 4 o'clock, you know, and a fizzy drink at 10 p.m. The kid's playing on a phone, you know, not getting any sleep. And then you're wondering why your kid doesn't sleep or eat or live a routine life. I think so much of this would be resolved if people weren't sitting around on their phones. They were out in the fresh air, being physically active. They were eating a healthy, low sugar diet and getting enough sleep. I don't think even 10% of the people who claim to have ADHD actually have it. But I'm not a medical expert.
No, but you're right. I mean, you're saying all the right thing. My daughter's a school teacher, and she says exactly what you're saying. It's very difficult. It's very challenging, especially in middle-class areas where there are selection tests for grammar schools and so on, where people say they want an excuse to know why their kid's not doing well in the exam. The reason the kids are not doing well in the exam, they're not very bright, probably. That's all it is.
Well, they're perfectly average.
Exactly, but there's lots of jobs you can do if you're not perfectly bright, you know. You don't have to be a radio producer, for example, a TV producer.
They're all geniuses.
But there are lots of good jobs, and some kids do extremely well. And you look at the spectrum of people in top places, not all of them were the brains of Britain.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is the urge that parents have to put a label on the child. I remember meeting people who they told me, oh, my kid's got dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dyslexia, everything. But she was, again, a perfectly average kid. And occasionally was a little bit clumsy. Well, I'm clumsy, but I haven't got dyspraxia. I'm just a bit clumsy in the way that there's some people who are just athletic and brilliantly agile, and some people who aren't. But we've now put a label on as a problem on basically 50% of the population. It's mad.
And, you know, it's spawned a whole professional interface.
Oh, hasn't it just? Yeah.
Not just psychiatry, but life coaching, for example. What is that about? Where does that come from? To try and make you a better person, more effective in your job. Voice coaching, as we've heard from Keir Starmer. I mean, for goodness sake, where is it all leading to?
Isn't there an issue, though? Look, it's not in your interest. You can't, you know, and Hippocratic goes, you can't diagnose someone with cancer who hasn't got cancer or something. Yeah, but there is an issue in the mental health world, and a lot of people know psychologists as opposed to psychiatrists. But even so, from my understanding, from people I know in this field, actually, you go to the specialist in bipolar or ADHD or autism, and you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to get that diagnosis. There is an incentive for everyone involved for that to happen, as opposed to for people to say, well, no. You know, and again, like, you know, when you talk about, you know, what was going on with the madness at the Tavistock Clinic and they have affirmation of children saying they were trans. You know, if you work at a clinic for trans kids, you're going to affirm it. There's no incentive for people to say, no, I don't think that is the issue. I think what you need is a bit more of a healthier lifestyle, some routine and a little less introspection, a little bit more, you know, do some sport, maybe do some charity work, and maybe you might feel better about yourself.
I think exercise is one of the key things.
Absolutely.
It's certainly valuable for depression. It doesn't have to be running marathons. No. It can be gentle exercise, walking, running, whatever you like to do. Exercise and healthy diet and a good body mass index, in other words, staying reasonably slim. Yeah. These are the sorts of things you want. And then your lifestyle will follow you.
And then we can have the resources to give the help that is really needed by adults and children who really do have mental health issues, who we really want to be able to help.
Yeah, and doctors are actually poorly trained in mental health. I mean, I was appallingly trained, but that was a long time ago. It's a bit better now. But my experience of mental health was subduing violent schizophrenics in Oxford Street with tranquilizer darts, basically, with the police. And that is not a good introduction to modern psychiatry.
No,
but a lot of us have that experience. And I think things have changed, and there are all sorts of edges where you have mental illness and where you have normality, and the boundary is blurred, and it's blurred at different times of the day for some people.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very careful. And of course, as we started off saying, it's costing an enormous amount of money.
16 billion quid. I mean, it's great. And again, even if that, some of those resources were able to be completely focused on the people who really need it, we could probably give them the help that they really do need. And when time and again, we know about people, young people who commit suicide because they haven't had the mental health care that they need. But because, again, people are kind of dealing with all the other people. Can I run another story by you? This is a woman, I'm not going to name her, but she's an IT executive. She was working at Capgemini. It's a global consultancy firm. She was on her probation period. So she hadn't even been, formally, they still had the option for basically saying you're not up for the job. She started struggling with her tasks. She asked for support. She said, I was trying to avoid taking the legal route because I really liked the company. It was my dream job. I loved it. I knew I could do it. I was trying to manage it in my head, but I realised I couldn't. I was experiencing anxiety. I started losing weight. I went to the doctor. I burst into tears. He said, you're depressed. You have anxiety. Last month, an employment tribunal in London found that the company, Capgemini, failed to provide the recommended neurodiversity awareness training, and this amounted to discrimination against her. And this apparently has big ramifications for businesses across the country. You've got someone who, my reading of this is, she couldn't do the job. It was too overwhelming for her. It didn't suit her personality, shall we say. And so she sued the company, even though she was actually not a permanent employee at that point. This is madness.
It is. Neurodiversity is another one. It's we're all neurodiverse, for goodness sake. Some people cope with it, some people don't cope. There's nothing. It's a new illness that's come out of nowhere. Even the words, they sound clever. They sound as though it means something. It means nothing. It means just variation in brain power.
But it's like people who get stressed out by a tight deadline and people who can't get any work done without a deadline. Well, I'm in the first category. Doesn't mean I've got a problem, or the people who can't do it have got. It's like someone turning up to do a job as a live radio host and then saying after a few months, oh, it just makes me anxious, I can't do it, but it's your fault.
I know. Physical illness is so much easier to handle, to categorise, to box into different diagnostic boxes and to measure progress. Mental disease is very difficult in all these counts. I think, as you keep saying, severe mental illness needs to be treated properly, and we need to have a mental health service that can cope with severe mental illness. But bringing it forward to more and more of the population, especially young people, is a crazy thing to do, because it just begets more and more of the same. It's a roller coaster that absorbs more and more funds, more and more time, and consume all sorts of problems. Teachers, the universities, everywhere.
And again, you say, it's a nation. How's that working out for us? I would say pretty darn badly. Professor Carol Scorer, always the voice of reason. Really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for that. Philip Ingram, as someone who's openly talked about, and it's really good. People talk about how, I think ever since I've been a journalist, they've said, we need to talk more about mental health. I am firmly of the view in the last 5-10 years, we need to talk less about mental health. I think we talk about it far too much.
No, we need to talk about it in the right way, and we need to make sure that it comes out in the same way that if you're talking about a physical illness, a cold, you've broken your leg or something else, it becomes that normal part of society. So
nothing to be ashamed of.
Nothing to be ashamed of, and you can turn around and say, I'm suffering from this, I'm suffering from that, but there needs to be proper diagnosis. My depression was a medical condition and was dealt with medically, and I got cured for that. My PTSD was a condition that was caused by the circumstances, and I got taught how to live with that and how to deal with it.
That's as opposed to a label and a sort of a get-out clause.
For life.
Yeah, exactly. Philip Ingram, again, that's why we have him on the show, talking sense, as always. Can I take a quick break? Up next, we're going to talk about why, if you're on the fat jabs, you may have to pay a heck of a lot more. Oh, you're going to ask me to pay for your fat jabs on the NHS? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
People keep saying, and they said this when reform hit 10%, then 12%, then 15%, they say, oh, that they've peaked there. They can't possibly go any higher in the polls, but they seem to keep going up. Zia's been very clear, we do need 350 plus MPs to do what we need to do. You hear a lot, we've had this huge petition with, about 1 million signatures to have an immediate general election, but I don't think that is what Reform will want. They'll want the Labour Party to mess things up so badly that it gets even worse for the Labour Party in terms of their support.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. 12:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram with me. Now, if you are watching or listening to this show and you are on the fat jabs, your Mounjaro, Ozempic or whatever, you're probably paying for them yourself. 9 out of 10 people on them currently are paying for themselves, or you're rapidly trying to eat as much as you can so you can get them on the NHS. But I've known huge successes from lots of people I know who have been on the drugs. Whether or not that success stays when they finish the drugs, we don't know. But they're certainly having a problem getting hold of it right now, because one of the world's biggest drug makers, Eli Lilly, has put a temporary pause on all orders of Mounjaro, which is basically considered to be the best of the fat jabs in terms of all the studies showing it's the one that helps you lose the most weight, to cope with soaring demand. And they, as a result of calls from Donald Trump, the US president, to basically sell them at a cheaper rate to Americans, and in return for which they'll have to put the prices up elsewhere, they are planning to basically massively increase the cost of the drugs here in the UK. And their wholesale price is set to cost between £133 and £330 per injection, up 170%. Well, let's talk about this with Thorin Govind, who's a pharmacist. A very good afternoon to you, Thorin.
Lovely to be back with you.
Lovely to have you on.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's get into this. Donald Trump has been looking at the domestic prices in the US, and looking at that, he's encouraging, I'd say pressing drug manufacturers to look at their pricing. Eli Lilly are saying that this is about getting our pricing in line with what they're charging Europe. So effectively, we've been paying too little for a little while.
Fair enough. It's a private company. They've developed the drug. They can sell it for what they want, as far as I'm concerned.
And then with regards to the NHS have got an agreement with Eli Lilly on this. So this is really going to be hitting those, as you've said, who are buying these privately, getting them prescribed through regulated professionals. And we are seeing people asking a lot of questions and coming into the pharmacy. And we know that people are trying to access some of these more than they should. And we are trying to manage those expectations.
When you say more than they should, are people stockpiling, or you're saying people are taking too many of these jabs to try and increase the weight loss?
I think there is a concern that people are trying to stockpile. Yesterday was actually the cut-off date for us to place any orders ahead of the price increase, which is going to occur on September the 1st. There's also a lot of queries from patients because, understandably, this is a huge increase, as you've rightly said there, 170% in some cases. People are wondering what they can do and how to maintain their weight loss.
I've got an idea for them. I've got this. Again, I don't know if it's scientifically proven, but it's very, very cheap. They could eat less.
Well, we know that these drugs drown out some of the food noise, and you alluded there to the difference between the Wegovy's and Mounjaro. And Mounjaro works in two different pathways compared to semaglutide, which is in Wegovy. So as you've quite rightly stated there, this is one of the ones which we've been looking at and has had some positive clinical trials. But we need to be having those conversations with patients as to what their alternative options are.
Yeah, well, again, the alternative option is put down the pizza. And again, I know people who are taking these jabs, got them paying for them privately, and they have seen massive weight loss. But we also know from the studies that people put the weight back on within a year if they stop using these drugs, unless they have a complete change in the way they eat, they think about their exercise levels, and the way they sort of their relationship with food. Same with pretty much any weight loss diet, let alone with jabs, where in terms of once you get your appetite appetite back, you're going to carry on eating again. But, I mean, there is a big concern that the NHS could suddenly have to foot more of the bill of this, because the people who are currently getting it privately will then go to the NHS saying, oh, I want to get hold of it. And we're told by Wes Street, the Health Secretary, he wants to put, millions of people on these weight loss jabs eventually, thinking it's going to save the NHS money. There's no evidence that it will do that so far. But would you be concerned about that?
Yes, so we know that people are already considering moving to some of the other weight loss medications. But my big concern is we know that people are trying to access these through unregulated sources. So your marketplaces on social media, people are going to extreme lengths to get hold of them. And really, my warning is to people, please don't do this. Please make sure you're getting them through a regulated source.
Not a fake one.
Exactly, because you just don't know what you're injecting into your body. There's a huge risk. You could die, quite frankly, if you go out and find these drugs from unscrupulous sources who are preying on people's vulnerabilities. Let's get that straight there. This is about people making a quick buck out there and trying to sell medication, which is not medication.
Yeah, but fundamentally, people, this company, they spent, billions developing this drug. They've developed the drug to make money. They're private organisations. They have the right. It's not a life-saving drug. This isn't about this is not going to cure Ebola and there's a massive Ebola pandemic roaring around the planet. This is about people choosing to take this route instead of the free route of cutting down their food intake. I mean, presumably also, if they're losing weight at the rate they're losing, according to these stats, they're eating a lot less food, they're saving on their food bill, in which case they can probably afford to buy these drugs at the higher price.
I think, I don't want to stigmatise those who really need to use this.
Not
and we want
stigmatising people.
Well, we need those who need it to have it, but there are definitely people who do not need this drug who are seeking it, and that is a big concern.
OK. Torren Dogovid is pharmacist. Thank you very much indeed. She's dealing with it at the shop, and Philip Ingram, they're entitled, Eli Lilly, entitled to put the price up however much they want. They can charge £1,000 a jab if they choose, can't they?
They can, but if they've got agreements in place with the NHS and all the rest of it, those are surely contractual, and it would be easier for them to reduce the price in the United States instead of putting the price up across the board. But all they're concerned about is their profits.
Which they're entitled to do.
They're a commercial company.
I'm going to buy shares in Manjaro. Eli Lilly, why not?
Should have done
it a long time ago. Yeah. But I mean, they're a private company. They can do what they want to do.
Exactly.
There are plenty of alternatives, and there's an alternative which you don't have to buy anything at all.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there. Anyway, no doubt, as a taxpayer, I'll end up paying for it all, but there we are. Ian Collins is here, a man who'd never need a fat jab.
No, it's amazing how many people are on the old Ninjago or whatever it's called. But they tell you. I mean, it's not. There's no taboo to it, really, which is good.
I went to a party in the summer. I swear to you, like half the people I knew there were on it. But again, I'm fascinated to see. Are they planning to be on it forever? Because that's the reality. Unless you stay on it forever, you're going to put the weight back on.
I saw a guy in Oxford Street I used to work with. This fella, I'm not kidding you, his butt cheeks were in 2 different postcodes up until about